Scripture tells us, do to no one what you would not have done to you. Therefore, let us pray that we recognise and respect the faith, colour, gender and orientation and opinion of other people by engaging in dialogue with them and by doing our best to promote peace, the sharing of resources and providing safe environments that are free of corruption and criminality at every level of society, at home and abroad. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Barwise. Please be seated, everybody. We all ready? There are no plans for a fire alarm test. If you hear the alarm, please leave the building by the nearest exit. Please ensure mobile phones are switched off or on silent. Restrooms are located on all floors, but please ask a member of staff for details should you require one. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and will eventually be loaded onto the Council's YouTube channel. Can I please remind all members that whilst we can disagree politically, please remain respectful to each other whilst dealing with Council business. Now, members of the public, members and officers, you are reminded that under the Openness of Local Government Bodies Regulations 2014, the press and public may film, audio record, photograph and use social media whilst the meeting is in progress for Part A items only, and as long as no disruption is caused to the meeting, anyone filming is asked to focus their attention on elected members rather than other visitors. Firstly, I have the sad duty to inform you of the deaths of 4 colleagues. Andy Bamber, who was the Council's Revenues Manager for the shared services since August 2023, passed away on the 7th of August following a short period of illness due to pancreatic cancer. Andy leaves behind his wife and 3 daughters, the youngest of whom is just 5 years old, and his funeral is being held today. Whilst only being at this council for a relatively short period of time, Andy had worked with his colleagues before whilst he was based at South Ribble. He will be greatly missed by his colleagues and friends at this council and Lancaster City Council. I send my condolences to Andy's family and friends at this difficult time. Another colleague, Kathleen Sorin, was a well-respected member of the cleaning team who worked across many areas of the council, including Preston Markets, the mobile team and the crematorium. Sadly, Kathleen passed away after a long illness, and her funeral was held on the 31st of July and was attended by her colleagues. I send my condolences to Kathleen's family, friends and colleagues at this sad time. It has also been brought to our attention that former Town Clerk, Chief Exec and Clerk to the Guild 1992, Tony Owens, has recently died. My sincere condolences are sent to Tony's family and friends. And we have also received news that former Conservative councillor Audrey Scott has recently died. Audrey served on the council for a total of 16 years during the 80s and 90s, representing the wards of Deepdale and Sherra Green, and she sat on a number of committees and outside bodies during her service. Audrey's funeral was held on the 26th of July. I send my condolences to Audrey's loved ones at this sad time. I would also like to notify Council that I wrote to the Mayor of Sefton recently to convey this Council's condolences for the awful murders and attempted murders of young children and their carers in Southport. The Mayor's office at Sefton have since written to me to thank the Council for the letter of condolence. I think I shared it with you all. I would now ask you to please stand for a minute's silence in respect to our former colleagues and in memory of the children who died in Southport. Thank you. Finally, I have to announce that this is the last meeting of council before Mr. Adrian Robinson, Director of Environment and what? Property. Sorry, Mr. Robinson. Leaves the council after 47 years of public service in local government, 20 years of that at Preston. Adrian has led many major projects to benefit this council and the public. He can be very proud of his long career in public service and wish him and his wife well in his retirement. Round of applause. Now I'd like to bring in the Assistant Director, City Solicitor and Monitoring Officer for some words of advice before we proceed today.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There are two items on the council agenda today, namely items 11 and 24, which impact on Ashton Park. Members will recall voting twice on the Ashton Park business case, which previously came to full council, and some members have also voted on a recent planning application in connection with the park. I would advise all members today to consider my advice before participating in any discussion and voting on agenda items 11 and 24. Members should only participate in the discussion and vote on the items if they can come to council with an open mind. This means that you're willing to listen to all the considerations presented at council before deciding on how to vote. Members may have said things previously or even indicated what view they might take in relation to the items under discussion, but that does not debar them from participating or voting on the matter if they can demonstrate on the day that their mind is open. If, on the other hand, members have a closed mind and have already decided how they will vote, then they should leave the council meeting and not participate in any discussion or vote on the items, as they have clearly predetermined the matters and can't look at them with a fresh pair of eyes. There may also be others in the chamber who feel that they can't vote on the matters because they have a personal and prejudicial interest in the matter under consideration. A member has a personal interest where the business in hand might reasonably be regarded as affecting their well-being or their financial position, or the well-being or financial position of a family member, a friend, or a business associate to a greater extent than the majority of other council taxpayers, ratepayers, or inhabitants in the ward affected by the decision, or the decision relates to or is likely to affect any interest that they have registered as a disclosable pecuniary interest on your Register of Interest form. When you have a personal interest in the business, you will have a prejudicial interest where the interest is one which a member of the public with knowledge of all the relevant facts would reasonably regard it as being likely to prejudice your judgment of the public interest, and where that business affects your financial position or the financial position of a family member, a friend, or a business associate. You also have a personal interest, which could be a prejudicial interest in the business, where the interest is one where a member of the public with knowledge of all the relevant facts would reasonably regard as being so significant that is likely to prejudice your judgment of the public interest. At the end of the day, it is down to each individual member to decide whether they have an open or closed mind and or whether they have a personal and prejudicial interest in the items under discussion. If members are found to have predetermined the matter or have a personal and prejudicial interest and do not leave the room, the decision which the council makes today will be unsafe and susceptible to challenge by judicial review. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Parmenter. Can I just remind everybody to make sure your mobile phones are switched off, please? Thank you, or in silent. Now, depending how we progress today, I may adjourn to take a short comfort break, but we will see how we proceed. Item 2 is declarations of interest. After what's just been said, are there any declarations of interest? Can members indicate if they have any disclosable pecuniary interests or personal and prejudicial interests in the items being discussed on the agenda? Councillor Holmes.
Thank you. I have a personal interest in that I live next to the park, which is arguably a prejudicial interest, so I will withdraw from the items on debate.
Thank you. Anyone else? Oh, Councillor Thompson.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Item 7, as a member of the Conservative Friends of Israel, I'm not quite sure where that puts me with the recent announcement by Mrs. Parmenter. I think I've got a non-prejudicial interest, but
It's entirely down to you whether you think you have a personal or that personal interest is prejudicial. If you think it's a personal interest, you can stay in and vote.
Was it? Councillor Hindle.
Just to note that I'm trustee of Let's Grow Preston, which has one of their bases on Ashton Park, but I don't see that as not having an open mind. Okay.
Councillor Rawlinson.
Item 10 as an employee of DWP, just a personal interest.
Anybody else? No? Item 3 are minutes of the last meeting. Are members happy that I sign the minutes as a correct record? Thank you, Councillor Iqbal. Item 4 is questions from members of the public. And we have one submitted for today from Miss Leary of Ashton Preston. Unfortunately, Miss Leary cannot be here today, so I will be asking the question on her behalf. The question is directed to Councillor Bailey as Cabinet Member for Environment and Community Safety. This is the question. The group in opposition to the changes on Ashton Park, who only represent 15% of the total electorate of Ashton, Larches and Leah wards, seem to have been pandered to because of their intensive and persistent campaign against councillors and people who did not agree with them. You have decided that the money for Ashton Park from the Levelling Up Funding Grant and the Football Foundation, which was to be used for grassroots football, is now being taken away and used elsewhere, even though it had passed planning. It is a travesty for the area, which desperately needs these facilities, and for the youth and future generations. Therefore, why are you giving in to them and abandoning the project for Ashton Park, which the majority were in favour of? Councillor Bailey, would you respond to that, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And obviously, thank you for her question. As someone who loves sports and love watching and playing football, and I guess can still consider myself in the bracket of a young person. Obviously, I think it's quite clear to everyone, obviously in this chamber, obviously, you know, my sort of view on say Ashton Park, and obviously, you know, how much I've sort of championed that. And obviously, I do fully understand the issues and the demands that grassroots football clubs face in Preston, and obviously the players, young and old, that people across the city have. Obviously, we have faced some significant challenges as an authority in terms of seeking that balance for the Levelling Up Fund. But obviously, this proposal to remove Ashton Park from the programme, it has been a very, very difficult decision. I know we made this commitment for this investment, and I guess to apologise, we're sorry that it looks like it won't be able to go ahead. This council, however, does remain committed to enhancing football and sporting facilities across Preston. Of course, the Levelling Up proposals will still deliver a refurbished football pavilion on Moor Park and a new football pavilion on Waverley Park. Also to add as well, this authority has an outstanding track record of obtaining and attracting funding to enhance our parks and green spaces, amongst many other things. And I can assure the person who asked this question that this work will continue. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Bailey. There will be there will be no supplementary question, as Miss Leary is not with us today, but a copy of Councillor Bailey's response will be sent to Miss Leary after the meeting. Item 5 is questions to cabinet members, chairs of committees and representatives of outside bodies. Got Van Meulen, I've got Garnis, I've got Thompson. Got them. Got Holmes, got you. No. Yeah. Got 9 of you. If there's more, we'll go on afterwards. Councillor Potter, you're first.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question was going to be to Councillor Coupland, but I assume she's away today. So if it's okay, Matthew, I'll ask you the question. But I also just want to welcome our new councillor to the chamber as well on his first one, and congratulations on his brilliant victory in the by-election. My question is regarding Preston Hospital. Obviously, we've had a change of government, which I'm sure you're delighted about. What representation have you or your cabinet member made to the new government about the future of Preston Hospital and when we might see it?
We are seeking a meeting. We've already written to our MP about the hospital. My own personal view is that the new hospitals programme, we don't know what the government's going to do with that, but you know, we know there's a preference we feel towards the hospital within South Ribble, but I think we should be fighting for Preston. I want to see a new or rebuilt facility within the Preston Council area. So conversations have taken place already with the MP Mark Hendrick. We've made representations to the government and the NHS, and obviously we'll continue those conversations with the new Labour government very soon. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, obviously you've, thank you for that response, and I appreciate that this isn't your remit, but obviously there have been strong suggestions that the building hospitals programme will be delayed yet further. Would it be, in your opinion, not acceptable for Preston's Hospital to be further delayed than what was already done under the previous Conservative government?
I do think we've got to give the new government a little chance to settle, because they've only been in office a number of weeks. Obviously, we are fighting, and we do want to see a facility within the Preston local authority area, and I think we're in a minority of opinion. We want to see greater investment in our NHS. We want to see often less private sector involvement in the NHS, and I think there's more of an opportunity of that with the Labour government. But obviously, yes, of course, we don't want to see any delays to a new facility, but the government will be looking at everything. And I think what they're trying to do is to make sure that the health service they do deliver in Preston and beyond is as first class as it can be. But we're going to seek a meeting soon with the new MP, Maya Ellis, and also we'll seek meetings with the NHS about our views for having a decent facility within Preston. Thank you.
Councillor Holmes next with a question.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's a question of Councillor Bailey. I'm a bit concerned about the recycling rates that we have in Preston. I'm wondering if there's anything coming up in the future that might assist those.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes, for your question. So we have actually received some funding from an environmental charity, Recoup, and consultancy Beyondly, to distribute messaging across a variety of different channels, including in-person events in areas with high contamination where recycling rates aren't particularly high. So throughout September and the start of October, we will be running a campaign entitled Join Us, which will try and encourage Preston residents to join within their community and recycle right. And what we want to try and do is focus on the quality and quantity of recycled collection. So this campaign will include recycling guide leaflets, which will be distributed to all domestic properties at the start of September. In the first 2 weeks of September, promotion on social media with also some local charities, businesses and local community organisations involved too. A workshop at local primary school in an area where recycling is relatively low, billboards and advertising, and also educational stalls. In terms of what is being talked about in terms of the government, some people may be aware that HMRC introduced an environmental tax in April 22. So if a business imports or manufactures plastic packaging containing less than 30% recycled content, they are subject to the plastic packaging tax. Now, it's chargeable about £200 per metric tonne of plastic used, and it's aimed to reduce the amount of plastic and encourage in recycling. Now, the money collected by the government may potentially be given to local authorities to help increase their recycling rates. That might be potentially in terms of money, and obviously that we'll be waiting on further news on that, maybe around November time. So I'm happy to update council on that proposal as well. But in terms of what we're doing locally as well, I just thought I'd let the council know, because obviously I'm well aware that our recycling rates are relatively low compared to other Lancashire areas. But this is just something we're doing, and hopefully government will give us some more resources and more funding to try and hit better targets. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Do you have a supplementary? Councillor Van Mierlo, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. My question is also to Councillor Bailey. So it's just come to my attention of recent problems with fly tipping. And can you tell me if there's been an increase of reported fly tipping?
I mean, fly tipping has always been an issue. I think when I appeared at ONS, I can't remember when it was. I think it was like maybe March, February time last year. Obviously, I had the figures from previous financial year when I wasn't cabinet member, and then the position the year afterwards, and it had actually reduced fly tipping from the previous year, not by a huge amount. In terms of this year, I don't have the figure off the top of my head, but it's lower. Obviously, at this moment in time, it's not the the end of the financial year at all, the end of the year, but I can get those figures to you. It's what feedback I've had from officers is there's not been an increase at this moment in time. There can be obviously peaks and troughs just like throughout the year, but my last update I had, there's been no increase or any sort of explosion of fly tipping, but obviously it does remain an issue throughout the city, and it's something that, you know, we do try and invest in. We do spend, I think the budget's about £2 million in terms of the streets, and obviously fly tipping comes under that, so we do invest a lot of money to try and reduce, and our officers are very, very good at reacting as fast as possible depending where the demands and needs, and obviously each individual circumstance as well. So yeah, thank you for your question.
Do you have a supplementary, councillor?
Yeah, it was just really, so you're right that I've had the feedback that the fly tipping is usually cleared up promptly, which is brilliant. But it was just, what measures do the council take to reduce the fly tipping?
It's a good question because every single circumstance is different. So, for example, if there's an area where there's just been, say, fly tipping because it's from the outside area, we'll normally try and clear it away as fast as possible. It's been in instances where there's an allocated area and then there's been an increase in fly tipping, and it's near enough consistently. What officers will do is they'll go around and door knock on those houses and try and educate them. Because at the end of the day, yes, we can just keep clearing it away, but at the end of the day, some residents do need to take responsibility for themselves. So it does depend on the circumstance. So there might be a difference between if there's an area of road which doesn't experience a lot of fly tipping, then we'll try and clear it away as fast as possible, and we might not need to educate that particular road or the residents. If there is, say, alligators in a situation and consistent fly tipping, then officers will react and make sure residents are trying to be educated and say that actually, yes, we might clear it away on this instance, but you need to now keep this up to date. Obviously, it doesn't mitigate some of the issues because obviously there might be some HMOs, there might be people moving in and out of the area. Sometimes there are language barriers, but we do react where necessary. So each individual circumstance is different. If there is, say, a particular hotspot in one of your wards, maybe you think of a different approach, then I'm obviously welcome to suggestions.
Thank you. Councillor Brooks.
Hi, my question is Councillor Wise, and I wonder if she could give us an update on the Animate, particularly construction, and where we're up to. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Yeah, I mean, Animators, I'm sure everybody agrees, is a really exciting project. The construction is due to end at the end of October. However, that does not mean everything opens at the end of October. That means the Eric Wright Construction Company and Maple Grove Development sort of leave, and the fabric of the building is finished, but then it's handed over to the tenants for them to fit it out. And so, you know, the cinema, the bowling alley, the restaurants, they will be doing that. The aim is that the whole project, whatever you call it, Animate, will actually open sometime in the spring. And so, as I say, we are really excited about it, and I think it's going to be a huge asset to Preston. And so, yeah, I'm sure we're all looking forward to the opening. Thank you, Councillor Brooks.
You have a supplementary, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Guise, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I have a question for the Cabinet Member for Planning. And it's regarding, I was in touch with a resident about a piece of casework regarding planning enforcement. And I got a very informative response back from an enforcement officer, but she said in the course of her response, at present, I am the only enforcement officer in the team and dealing with a significant caseload. And this might explain why communication in this case had dropped off and enforcement action was slow. So I was wondering if she could tell us, is this correct? How many enforcement officers are there in the team? How many does the administration plan to have in place in general? Because we were of the understanding that more were to be hired. So can she explain why this conscientious officer is on her own, and what steps are being taken to get her some help? Thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. So we are within the planning department looking at recruitment. Enforcement is one of the teams that requires more staffing. Advertisement posts have gone out for those posts, and they are currently working on going through applications and the interview and selection process. Unfortunately, it's a issue that we have with many other departments within the council, also retaining the staff and filling those roles. But I know the planning department are working really hard to try and recruit good quality staff, and we are currently in the process of recruiting for that.
Supplementary.
Yeah, just would you be able to specify what a full complement of team members would be in the enforcement team?
I believe we are looking to recruit 2 extra posts. However, what would be an ideal team, I can't possibly comment, because I'm sure the workload would be extensive. I'm sure there's a backlog because of the gap in recruitment and the gap in the post at the moment. Hopefully, once those posts have been recruited as a team, they will work efficiently and work through that backlog.
Councillor Akhtar, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to pose a question to the Leader of the Council in response to the horrific knife attacks that took place in Southport and then the subsequent race riots that took place right across the UK. The BME councillors in Preston had put forward an emergency motion that we were hoping would be heard at this meeting, but unfortunately wasn't procedurally accepted onto the agenda. That being the case, I wanted to pose the question to Matthew with regards to what happens in terms of our communities and protecting our communities in response to what has happened since the Southport incidents. Those attacks did not happen out of nowhere or in a vacuum. They happened because there has been a years-long and systematic denigration of BME communities, of immigrants, and indeed the Muslim faith. And that led to the far right being able to capitalise on the attacks, the awful incident in Southport, to turn their attention and attack people, I think, ethnic minorities and other migrant communities. People in this city are terrified still. There is a lack of racial literacy, it feels sometimes, in public institutions, where they perceive racial attacks to happen on one day and then everyone moves on the next, and it doesn't work that way.
Excuse me, Councillor Akhtar. It's a question, not a statement. Please ask your question.
What will this council do to pressure Lancashire County Council, which has provided zero support to schools in the city of Preston, schools like Plungington in my own area, where 40% of the teachers are BME, more than 50% of the pupils are BME, and people are terrified about coming back to school. There is no support for them. That is an emergency for our communities, which are full of migrants. There are community tensions bubbling under the surface. How can we support? Thank you.
Councillor Akhtar, thank you very much. Obviously, a lot of the far-right riots that take place were dealt with by my colleagues in my absence. Obviously, Councillor Khan, Councillor Bailey, Councillor Rawlinson handled it very well. Obviously, it was very worrying actually seeing what was happening, but I think the way we responded as an authority is really positive. We had people who were supporting the potential threats to businesses in our community, boarding them up. Work was done with the Lancashire Council and Moss and others. And obviously since then, what we are doing is we're getting all our faith communities together to look at what more we can do to tackle this hatred and intolerance, and what events we can do and how we can work across our communities to make sure that we really do challenge the narrative. And I think what you're saying about the narrative is correct in many ways, because some of the things that are being said by the press, for example, is, in my opinion, Islamophobic. And there's other forms of discrimination which they've put forward as well in the history. So I just think people who are in positions of authority, including the media, need to be responsible, because actions do have an effect. I may well bring Councillor Khan in on this, because I'm sure she'll have some thoughts on it. But what I would say is that we've worked to have a very strong anti-racist agenda within Preston. We've worked with unions, we've worked with Show Racism at the Red Card, where we've had lessons within schools around how we need to tackle anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, all forms of racism. We've had Standing Together Against Racism. We've had the Heartstone Project trying to get into children and young people, speaking to them about the evils of racism and how it's something we've got to challenge at every level. I just love LCC to take forward schemes like that. I love that every school in Lancashire should have education where we teach children about how we need to be together in tolerance and support all forms of and tackle all forms of racism going forward. I'd love to do that. Obviously, we'll feed into LCC, but from my experience of them as the Conservative authorities, they're not always receptive to what Labour authorities want to do. But I think in the light of what's happened, we need to do that. If Councillor Carner, Rawlinson or Bailey wants to come in, I'd be more than happy to hear their thoughts, because I really want to commend the work they did in my absence. It was difficult to stay away, but I was on a pre-booked holiday somewhere, not in Preston. Thank you.
Councillor Khan.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just following on from what Councillor Brown said, and to give some reassurance to Councillor Akhtar that I've already started the ball rolling with County Council to bring this to their attention. The mention of 2 particular programmes or projects that we led on in Preston City Council was the Heartstone project, and also working together with Show Races and the Red Card. This is about working with schools, primary schools and Year 7 pupils of secondary schools, so that we could raise the awareness and teachings around anti-racism, about Islamophobia, about anti-Semitism, about tolerance. And what we had done was I personally had approached County Council, the Education Directorate last year, when we were running this programme, to see if it could be rolled out to all schools across the county. The response came back that they did not have sufficient funding and could not do this. In view of the recent riots and what we've seen and what I personally viewed and saw, that there was a number of young people, and you're talking about young people between the ages of 11 to 16 that were protesting, that were out there. So there is a need, a very definite need, that through education, through our schools, that we raise greater awareness of anti-racism and have such programmes being implemented in the schools. So that is something that I will personally be taking through with my colleagues, county councillors at County Council. I mean, going back to leading on from the protests and riots, we at Preston City Council have started looking at how we can create greater community cohesion, how we can strengthen that. We are a very diverse city, and we are also a very tolerant, harmonious city as well. We don't want to see division, and this is what was coming to Preston, for people to try and divide us. So we've already started having those communications and conversations through our faith covenant with our faith and community organisations to see what we can do in Preston to raise our voice and to show that we are not divided. And we will be holding a series of events and involving all faith organisations and faith representatives and community representatives in the city. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Councillor Potter, is this on this? Okay.
Just very briefly, Mr. Mayor, I'm not sure which of the Labour members are now permanent members of Lancashire County Council's Children and Education Scrutiny, but I am. Feel free to send me any information you want, and open offer for me to take it forward and put it to that committee.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor, forgot your name, Akhtar. You want to? Have you a supplementary question?
I certainly do, yes.
Not a statement.
I have a supplementary question, Mr.
Right.
Mayor, and that is the question. You know, I'm really pleased with the work that Preston City Council has done, and this administration has done. That's not in question here. The challenge for me is we have a very immediate threat to our schools and to our staff and to our pupils and parents who are concerned about their children going back to school in 1.5 weeks' time, 2 weeks' time. Lancashire County Council has not done a risk assessment of schools and school safety. I come back specifically to Eldon in my ward. It's had teachers' tyres slashed, home windows smashed. It has teachers abused and physically threatened with assault. They've had online abuse, racist and misogynistic abuse. That is not acceptable. So can we lobby LCC to do the risk assessments? That's the critical issue. And if they don't do, then we can have another conversation. But I'd like to see LCC challenge. I think that's the explicit call for me. Thank you.
Councillor Actor, yes, I think what we need to do is we need to meet afterwards and we need to get a form of words, because I think whether it's Eldon School or wherever, there should not be any, I mean, if there's any form of abuse, alleged or otherwise, it needs to be investigated very seriously. So I think we need to obviously write about Eldon, but also have that principle across Preston. And that principle in light of this far right activity that basically came out of nowhere, and especially on the back of that tragic killing of those, you know, young girls who obviously we've lost, which is devastating for the families and beyond. So, you know, let's meet up and we'll actually get a form of words together and make sure we have a response for Eldon, but across Preston as well, around certain principles. Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, do you want to come in on this?
Yes.
Because I had you on the list with a question.
The question, yeah.
Is this the question?
No, this is to do
Right.
with this.
To do with this, crack on then, please.
Right, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I think the trouble is with this particular issue is that it gets reduced down to certain things like maybe it's far right. It wasn't all far right. And people talk about the Muslim community. The Muslim community isn't one homogenous group of people. It's people with a varying different views. And there are some extreme like anybody else, and there are some that are not. So I think I've sort of, in my own way, tried to have a dialogue with certain Muslim communities and other communities about this particular issue. I think we're all better if we get along. But there are people who don't want to get along. And it's those things that we need to address.
Excuse me, Councillor Thompson, did you have a question?
No, this is a continuation of the debate from...
It's not a debate, it was a questions to members of the Cabinet.
Right, sorry. Well, I understood that I could lift a debate off the
No, it was Councillor Akhtar that tried to make it a debate or a statement.
Right, okay. Well,
okay, thank you.
All right.
Councillor Thompson, do you have a question of a Cabinet member?
Your timing is immaculate, Mr. Mayor.
Noted.
My question is to Councillor Matthew Brown. We are doing a lot of projects around the city with contractors, etc. at the moment. And I think one of the things that we have to respect is confidentiality and trust with the people outside the council. And I think it beholds us to keep that up because it's important. So can you tell me, I believe that there's been a few leaks to the press of information recently from some people say from your inner circle. I'm not so sure about that, but anyway, that's what they're saying. Can you tell me what have you done to counter this? And can you tell me, can you reinforce to members of the whole of the council that confidentiality is very important for our reputation? Thank you.
Councillor Thompson, I do agree. Obviously, people with responsibility will have responsibility, need to exercise those responsibilities correctly. However, sometimes when a journalist is on the phone to someone, people feel, attracted to pass on more information than they should. So we've reiterated to all our members the need, especially for things that our officers say are confidential, they must remain confidential. And obviously that has been put across very assertively in recent weeks. But I'll just say to the rest of the council chamber, because it's not just our group where potentially there has been leaks to the press, there's been others historically as well. So obviously we'll reiterate that message, and if there's something that comes from maybe from the chief executive as well, or the monitoring officer, that would be good also, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Have a supplementary.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Iqbal, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question for Councillor Hindle. And could you tell us the event coming up at the Moore Park, Ready to event? What's the update on it? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Councillor Iqbal. Basically, it's another really exciting event for Preston. It's been organised, I believe, really well by the BBC because they've used a partnership approach with the City Council, local businesses, local community. All the residents that are going to be affected by they won't be allowed to park outside their own house without a permit should have received a letter now explaining them how to get this permit and whether they need help. I believe Joe Riley is going to be doing a Radio 2 show before the event on the 5th of September. The full line out has been announced for some time now. There will be also other radio interviews taking place in the city, and it's providing us with great exposure on their airways. I've been told that the Saturday and Sunday main stage show will be recorded and highlights will be televised on the major channels. So again, it's another way that we're promoting our city. There'll be another stage during the main shows for the Radio 2 DJs doing their own individual music sets. And we're looking forward to welcoming 33,000 people on the Saturday and the Sunday. Okay. Do you have any?
Is there a supplementary?
Just a quick comment. Let's pray for good weather on the day.
Oh, yeah.
Councillor Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for, I think it's Councillor Bailey, so apologies if it's not. Over the summer, many parts of Preston have continued to be plagued by bike-related antisocial behaviour and some related criminality, including my own ward of Ingram Cotton, surging burglaries and vehicle theft. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the police who have been working tirelessly throughout the summer, done a great job keeping crime down to a minimum. But looking forward, it would appear that the Guild Wheel sometimes is exploited by some as an access and exit point. I was wondering if I could ask for support from the neighbourhood and parks team to carry out a review of the Guild Wheel, of its maintenance, its infrastructure, its signage and its markings, in order to make sure this remains a fantastic resource for the people of Preston and not an opportunity for inappropriate behaviour.
Yes, thank you very much for your question. I think it's last full council had a question on antisocial behaviour. I think since then, obviously with Clive Grunshaw, obviously now the Labour Police Crime Commissioner, myself and the leader have met with him. It was just an initial meeting, but within that, obviously we tried to evidence where the crime hotspots are, compare it to figures across Lancashire and also figures across different wards in Preston. And we wanted to highlight that we in Preston do need more resources to deal with crime. Yes, it is, I guess you could say, more of a police issue in terms of antisocial behaviour. Obviously, we're doing our bit by recruiting another ASB officer at Preston City Council. So we've tried to evidence to the Police Crime Commissioner that we're doing all we can to try and increase police presence and try and reduce antisocial behaviour, and we want the Police Crime Commission as well to put more resources into Preston. So that's maybe hopefully answering your ASB question. In terms of, say, the Guild Wheel, if there's anything to see you've highlighted, any say broken bits and bobs along the route, then the Parks Departments are very, very good at repairing when necessary. If there's any sort of individual instances that maybe haven't been repaired as fast as you wanted to, then please highlight with myself. But obviously, we're very, very keen on the Guild Wheel. Obviously, I know it was a long time ago when it was set up, but it's an extremely popular cycling route. And obviously, it's incredibly heavily used. So it's something we still remain committed to. So I'm happy to meet with you if there are any instances where you think there could be improvements made. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Is there a supplementary?
No supplementary.
Thank you. Anyone else with a question for a cabinet member or a chair of a committee? Item 6 is a report on the Preston People's Climate Jury and the response to the recommendations. Councillor Henshaw, are you moving this report?
I am, Mr. Mayor. I'm very happy to move this report, and I hope everybody's happy to approve it. I'd love to talk an awful lot about this because it's been very close to my heart for a while. But anyway, I'm not going to. You all know the background. We had money from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. We had a jury. In the end, it was just 27 regular members of the public from Preston who represented every area, every each gender, ethnicity, age group, everything, the whole multiple indices of deprivation were all looked at, and we had a real mini Preston that came into this process cold. They had 30 hours of presentations, questioning, and the result was 24 recommendations, which is why this is a big report. Out of the recommendations, 22 were on the main three themes of transport, food and housing. These are the biggest emitters of greenhouse gases in the city. The question that they were looking at, I will repeat it because it's such a good question, is how can we in Preston work together to address the opportunities and challenges of climate change in a way that is fair to everyone? So that was like the underpinning question that then led to these recommendations. I've missed two of the recommendations, which is about monitoring and harnessing the power of the community, and those are also equally important. We had a public launch in May when representatives from organisations across the city took ownership of some of these recommendations and then committed to support their delivery. We had a smaller presentation for councillors just last month looking at the next steps. I think it's so important that we continue to listen to the voice of the jury. Even though their work is finished, they are committed to helping still. There's a couple in the audience up there. They're meeting next week to discuss the Climate Festival, which is one of their recommendations, again, harnessing the power of the community. So the action plan, I'm sure you've all looked at it, looked at all the recommendations. We're already underway with a lot of these things in those recommendations. For instance, Community Energy Preston, they've put together an information pack for schools that's going to be going to LCC portal. We've got research underway around improvements in rented energy efficiency and looking at an enforcement of a minimum energy efficiency in private rented houses. Public transport, that was such a big one. So LCC do have a group looking at safety and bus fares and things, but there's no member of the public on that, which is why one of the recommendations is we have a citizens' assembly looking at buses. EV strategies mentioned in the leaders' report. Food, the jury have been busy again. They've met with this is a mouthful, the Central Lancashire Procurement Practitioners Group, looking at how big organisations can procure more locally produced food supplies. Preston City Council got an allotment strategy underway. And as I said, there's a meeting next week where the jury are having their first planning meeting for this climate festival, which is all about raising awareness. So I do hope you will accept this report, including its recommendations. Do I need to read the recommendations out? The first one is thanking them and acknowledging them for all the work that they've done. And then, we've got 5 things that we need to approve from the plan. All about future devolution agreements, arrangements, and how Preston College needs to continue to be resourced. That was another action that's already underway. We've given Preston College money from the UK Shared Prosperity Fund to help improve green skills and retrofitting skills. I've mentioned LCC and the Lancashire Citizens Assembly to improve our bus services. Obviously, if we can have a Preston-owned bus service, that would be even better. The Better Buses Bill, which is a government initiative that's mentioned in the King's speech. So all that's being looked at as well now. We need secure cycling in the city centre. We've only really got the railway station, so we need one at the bus station. So that's we'll lobby LCC for that. And then the final one is meeting with Preston MPs to raise the jury's concerns about the impact of climate change on the local horticultural industry and the implications for the local economy and food security. So I'm very happy to read this report, and I do hope everyone will agree to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have a seconder for this report? Thank you, Councillor Close. Councillor Whittam, do you want to come in on this?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Councillor. Firstly, hugely supportive
Excellent report. Lots of work gone into this. It's quite clear. It's a great piece of work from a cross section of the city, so it's to be commended. I have a couple of queries around the prioritisation. It's hugely ambitious. There's 24 initiatives in there. I accept that 22 of them are around 3 specific sectors, but the first part of the question is, do you think that you are a little too broad in terms of your challenges here for your outcomes, because you're spreading yourself very thin? And the second part of it is, it's an interesting question around, it was point 3.79, sustainable commuting. Why have you only focusing on support for public sector workers for choosing more sustainable options for transport? That seems a bit of an odd one. It's, in fact, in reality, it was the only outlier that I could see in that report. Thank you.
So you are right, Stephen. It is a very ambitious action plan. A lot of it is not under our responsibility, which is why we had the launch and we got different organisations involved. Are we spreading ourselves thinly? We're going to be revisiting this every few months. Say we're still in contact with the jury, which doesn't happen normally. Normally the climate jury do their work and then that's the end of it. But ours are very committed to helping still. What was your final question then about why are we using public sector and not private?
Just
basically,
it was a particular support for public sector workers for sustainable commuting, and there was no mention of anybody else.
Okay. Well, I'll take that way and I'll have a think about that. I mean, we are aware that different private sector organisations do things like car share schemes and everything, and maybe it's because we can't truly influence that. But saying that, we are helping other businesses to decarbonise. So I can take that away and look at that again. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Whittam. Councillor Jewell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Could I commend Councillor Henshaw for the work she's done on this, and indeed the climate jury as well. But Mr. Mayor, can I pursue some assurance that there are the resources available to pursue this action plan, and indeed, as is reflected in the actions, report back to this council every 6 months on the status of that action plan?
So with regards to resources, we'll be working very closely with the resources team. I suppose that's all I can say about that. Anything that needs further resourcing will obviously come back to council or cabinet or both for approval. We are aware that there's some work streams in place that may well need a bit, but nothing's going to be approved here now. It'll come back to full council. The action plan will be revisited regularly, and yes, we will come back to full council at least every 6 months, probably more frequently as things happen. I'm not reassuring you on the resources situation here, am I? I can see on your face, but all I can say is we have put a lot of money into this already. There are funds in the UK Shared Prosperity Fund that we are using for driving forward this. I don't think I can say any more, really.
Come back, Mr. Councillor Jewell.
Yeah, no, thank you for that, Councillor Henshaw. But my question, I was a little bit surprised by your response, because it seemed to infer that we had to go away to get resources to address some of those actions. And my interpretation of the report was that an excellent set of actions have been set and they would be pursued, and the outcome and the status of those actions would be reported back to the council every 6 months. That was my understanding of the report. So hence my question, do we already have in place the resources to address the breadth of those actions, pretty much along the lines of the question from Councillor Whittam? And will you be responding to this council every 6 months with a status update? Because it's excellent work and I'm not knocking that, but I just want to be sure that the expectations are being set, that these actions are going to be pursued and they will be reported back to this council.
Sorry, I obviously did misunderstand your question, didn't I? Yes, is the quick answer. Yeah, we will certainly come back to council all the time. Everything that's in there has been resourced, or we've got outside organisations involved. And yes, it's all been done properly. Thanks.
Councillor Darby, you have a question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd just like to echo what's been said in terms of congratulations on the work that's been done by yourself and by the climate jury. I'm also very pleased that there was the engagement with the councillors inviting to come along to some of the feedback. I'm just sorry that commitments meant I wasn't able to attend any of them, but I've read everything coming back with a great deal of interest. The particular point I want to raise is, again, building on the points being made. I assume that what will happen is that the council will try and focus very much on what you do have power on rather than ones that you don't. In particular, looking at the local plan that's coming up for 2026, which is referred to in points 3.8 and 3.30. Will you be proactively going forward and trying to feed this back into the local plan while it is still in progress to try and make sure that it's as green as possible?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a meeting that actually that myself and some of the jury have got with the with Carolyn. I can't remember her title, but she works in the planning department. She's doing the local plan. Yeah, we've got a meeting. I can't remember when, week after next on that. So yeah, absolutely, it'll be fed into the local plan as much as possible. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Darby. Thanks, Councillor. Are there any amendments to this report? No? Can we vote on this report? All those in favour, please show. Yeah, I'm voting, sorry. Thank you. Any against? Any abstentions? Reports accepted or carried. Thanks. Item 7 on the agenda is a report on the membership of the Britain-Palestinian Friendship and Twinning Network. Councillor Khan, are you moving this report?
Yes, I will be, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Yes, this report is about the membership of the British-Palestinian Friendship and Twinning Network. The report sets out the means by which the council will explore the option of a friendship arrangement between Preston and a town or city in Palestine. Mr. Mayor, I'd just like to just give a little bit of background before I go into details of the report. I feel some context is required. That how we came about pursuing this was that through our Muslim community in Preston, 14 mosques, community members have put in requests to us as Preston City Council to consider an arrangement, a friendship arrangement or twinning arrangement with a town or city in Palestine. This has come through the conflict that's been taking place, that is taking place in Gaza, and the number of deaths each day that Muslims are facing or we've had. So we as a council had to consider this, and we have considered it. And as I said, it is a means by which we are exploring. So Preston City Council is exploring the possibility of extending the hand of friendship to a town or city in Palestine, joining the informal network of organisations committed to or exploring the option of a formal friendship relationship is a sensible next step in taking the commitment forward. The network itself is a voluntary organisation with no political ties, which has agreed to work with the council and its communities to try and identify areas of possible shared interest or identify between Preston and towns or cities in Palestine to make connections as appropriate. So this would be through sort of civil relationship and partnership, looking at commonalities, looking at similarities with the town of Preston and with that of Palestine. The BFTN, which is the network, is an organisation which sets out a stated belief that by deepening friendship, understanding and connections between people in the UK and Palestine, it can change hearts and minds. It is a network of different groups with different activities, constitutions, sizes, locations and members. The cost of joining the network is a nominal price of £35 per annum. And the stated intention is that the Britain-Palestinian Friendship and Twinning Network and its voluntary committee exists to support its members' groups to an open relationship. We've already started this process. We have had discussion and conversations, 2 meetings with the network to look at possible towns or cities that are similar to Preston. They are working on that, and we have put forward a town and city as well, that we have a number of Palestinian families living in Preston that have been living in Preston for a number of years, have got family and friends in particular town that they come from, and that is what we're looking at, and also suggestions from the network itself. I would just like to add that at the last council meeting that we had is that our community, our Jewish community representatives came into this chamber and asked the question that whether we would consider a similar friendship arrangement with a town or city in Israel. And I had responded to them to say, yes, we would do that. But what we need to do firstly is to put this into place, to see how it develops, how it proceeds, what are the challenges for us, what we may encounter, and what are the benefits. It's not about a competition, and I'm openly saying this. This is about a process we've got to follow. The request had come through first from the Muslim community, and I'm not going to stand here and say that we won't accept a similar request. We will do, but it has to be in time. So the decision that is required, Mr. Mayor, to agree to the council becoming a member of the Britain-Palestinian Friendship and Twinning Network. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Is the report seconded? Yep. Councillor Akhtar, thank you. Do we have anyone wishing to speak on this? Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, I've read through the Liberals' amendment to this, and I've looked at the substantive, and I have to say that I think this is all very premature, because we're in a situation where there is still a war going on in this territory. We don't know what the outcome is. We don't know how much Hamas will have an involvement in future dealings with the administration of Gaza. And that is the big bogey in the room. Where is it all going to end up? And how much a role is Hamas going to play in influencing the people around this organisation? You've said it's a loose organisation of networks. What networks are involved in it? And I just think really the best thing to do would be to wait until there's a two-state solution where we have a democratic Palestine and we have representations from a recognised government, and then we can talk about twinning, etc. Because you can't twin with a town anyway unless it's in a recognised country, and it's not. It's recognised as an occupied state. There's so much in this that is fluid, and that we could well end up involving ourselves in something that becomes very divisive going forward. You talked about having representation from Palestine, people coming over from Palestine, Gaza, to talk in schools. Well, I don't think we should be politicising our schools, because that's what it seems like to me. So I would not be supportive of this arrangement, because I think it's premature. I don't think the report explores all of the possibilities of this. And I think what we're doing is we're losing a balance between the parties that are involved in this war in the Middle East. The Israeli section of it, the last time you were going to put forward a notice of motion that involved organising something with a town in Israel. And I know you said you're going to do this in the future, but as it stands, this particular notice of motion falls short of what I expect. And, you know, what else can I say? I just think it's premature, and there's too many players in this that we can't have any influence over at all. So at this point in time, I would be happy to say no, I can't support this report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Akhtar, sit down a minute. Now, you're seconding this report, but there's an amendment to this report. You can either speak now or speak after the amendment. After. Thank you. Anyone else want to speak on this report before we go to the amendment? Now, there's an amendment submitted by the Liberal Democrats, and a copy is on your seat, I believe. Who will be moving this amendment? Councillor Darby? Do you have a seconder?
Yes, Councillor Potts will be.
Oh, lovely. Thank you.
Sorry, Mr. Mayor, I can't help that. He said it first. So we're putting forward the amendment today. We want to support attempts from communities who are hurting in Preston to reach out to our fellow humans who are suffering, and to try and find a peace, and to try and find a common humanity. That's what our amendment is trying to do. We are trying to find that common humanity while the conflict rages, and I actually accept the point that perhaps it is premature, but if you're going to move forward, I think we want to be moving forward in tandem as far as we can do. At the last council, as you've already mentioned, we heard from members of the Jewish community, and to your credit, you listened to them and you replied very thoughtfully, and you said that you would be very willing to take things forward. And again, you've said that again today. What I wonder is there a reason, and I'm sure you'll have the opportunity to come back and answer the question, is why we need to go down the route of one before the other? Maybe there is a procedural reason. I hope you'll let us know. But in the meantime, what we want to do with the amendment is to try and move forward in tandem. We know that there are two sides that at the moment are very locked in their opinions, and perhaps for the sake of community cohesion, if we move together, that is what we should be trying to do. If we take a step back from 2024 and where we are at the moment, looking at this particular issue, Preston has got a very strong history with twinning in general. We were one of the first places to get involved with twinning after the Second World War. And in fact, it was barely a decade after the end of that horrific conflict that we went into a twinning arrangement with Recklinghausen, a town in Germany. And then in 1989, before even the end of the Cold War, we went into a twinning arrangement with Kalisz in Poland. We've got a very strong history of reaching out across beyond our borders to try and find that common ground and peace. And we do perhaps have an opportunity to do it here. Whether we want to be doing it now or whether we want to be waiting a little bit longer is perhaps an open question. But if we are going to do it, if we are going to try and find that peace, we need to work with both sides. We have representatives from both communities here in Preston who are part of our city. And I think the right way forward is to try and work together. Our amendment tries to acknowledge the fact that there are potential, let's call it pitfalls, with who might be involved with the civil administration, particularly in Palestine at the moment, whether we are legally allowed to work with the representatives who are there. But if we try and work together, if we follow this amendment, hopefully that will try and get past that so that we know that we're working with people who are operating in good faith so that we can move forward and genuinely try and help where we can in the Middle East. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Darby. Councillor Potter, do you want to speak now or wait? Thank you. Any other points on the amendment? Yes, Councillor? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I just wanted to say something about the amendment myself. Because in my opinion, the very best possible outcome in this choice would be for the council to do nothing at all. While twinning or friendship agreements are a source of cultural richness for residents of Preston and countless other towns and cities, the application of them to the most intractable territorial dispute on the face of the planet seems to me to be well outside the core responsibilities of this council. And we should focus instead on the matters which Preston residents are actually relying on us to administer. However, since I don't see any likelihood of the council resolving to do nothing, I am willing to support this amendment. But I would like to focus the council's attention on the fact that a twinning agreement is first and foremost an agreement between local governments. While the report describes the proposed agreement as a symbol of empathy with suffering people, we should not lose sight of the fact that the human and cultural exchanges in a twinning agreement only come after an official agreement between the local governments in question. And while the improvement of the lives of residents in the towns party to a twinning agreement is a noble goal, it can't be done whilst ignoring the nature of the local government on the other side. And the problem is that in Palestine, predominant governing entities are unacceptable as partners. In the case of Hamas, they are so grossly unacceptable that we cannot, in my judgment, approve a report like this without explicitly ruling out any dealings with those who share their philosophy. And by philosophy, I mean principally their belief in theocratic restrictions on personal liberty, their aim to destroy the state of Israel, and the practical upshot of the indiscriminate killing of Jews by their combatants. And I say this despite the fact that actually having dealings with Hamas themselves would be thoroughly illegal. Because the report, as I say, describes the proposed agreement as a symbol. And the problem with symbols is that they are vague. And there are multiple factors which make it very easy for a pro-Palestinian symbolic gesture to be interpreted as overly forgiving of the abject failures and crimes of Palestinian governance and Hamas in particular. I think it is imperative that the Council makes crystal clear when considering a step like this, that we do not intend to reach out a hand of friendship to Hamas, nor to anyone who shares their objectives. To make the gesture without saying so up front in the current context is to invite the opposite interpretation. And paragraph 2.2 of the amendment is there in part to ensure that no one can impute any such motivation or inclination to the council. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Guys. Have we anyone else wishing to speak on the amendment? Councillor Rawlinson.
Just found that speech truly awful, to be honest. Councillor Guys has just disregarded the views of tens of thousands of people in this city who care deeply about what's happening in the Middle East. And, you know, we've been accused of ignoring people's views on all sorts of things.
And yet, we're not just talking about Muslims either. There's a lot of people who are not Muslims in Preston who care deeply about what's happening to Palestine right now, with tens of thousands of people dying. And, if you looked at the population of this city and asked them, do they want us to say something? Do they care about what's happening over there? I think that would add up to many tens of thousands. And I think it's disgraceful that Councillor Guise suggests that we say nothing and do nothing.
Thanks, Councillor Rawlinson. Councillor Wise?
Yeah, I want to oppose the amendment and support the original report. And I very much echo what my colleague, Councillor Rawlinson says. This, first of all, is a friendship agreement. We're not actually entering into twinning at this stage. We might never enter into twinning. So I think one needs to recognise this is about friendship. We are, after all, a city of sanctuary. And I think we cannot, and I absolutely agree with my colleague, we cannot ignore what is going on in Palestine. I'm not a Muslim, but I actually find it horrendous every day to watch what is happening in Gaza. We're not just talking a couple of hundred people that have been killed. We're talking thousands and thousands of children, women and men who've been killed. We're also seeing them dying of starvation, lack of medication, having amputations without medication. Heaven knows how many people are buried under the rubble there. So I think it is important that as a city of sanctuary, that we reach out our hand of friendship to an appropriate city there to show we are 100% behind them and support them. So I hope that we can reject this amendment, and we've had some assurances from Councillor Khan about that, and that we actually agree with this report. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wise. Councillor Akhtar, do you want the right to reply?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just going to cut to the chase. I find it extraordinary that the two colleagues opposite have time to lecture us about Hamas, the dangers of Hamas.
Excuse me, Councillor Akhtar, excuse me. Do you want to speak now, or after we've voted on the amendment?
I'm happy to speak right now and get it over and done with. I find it extraordinary that the members opposite speak of Hamas and yet find absolutely zero words to say on the Israeli government, which is committing a genocide right now. For 330 plus days, it has been bombing the daylight and life out of people in Gaza, destroying every sinew of culture and existence for those people. The International Court of Justice has argued a found plausible case of genocide. The International Criminal Court has issued arrest warrants for the Defense Minister and the Prime Minister of Israel. The Knesset in Israel has actively stated that they will never accept a two-state solution that you lecture us on. They've explicitly stated that they will continue bombing the Palestinians in Gaza, but also in the West Bank. And let's just be really clear, when you talk about partners in this friendship, you focus on Hamas. Where is Hamas located? It runs the Gaza Strip, 2 million people, 2.2. Who knows how few are left now when the Israelis withdraw and we see the actual devastation that they've caused. There is 4.2 million Palestinians living in the West Bank under the control of Fatah. So you lecture us and you want to sideline the conversation to a conversation about Hamas. Let me remind you, sir, this is how colonial constructions of imperial racism work. You may smirk, sir, you may smirk, but let me tell you, let me educate you. There is deep-seated anti-Arab, anti-Palestinian racism in this country and beyond. Deep-seated, because you present the notions of Arabs as terrorists and extremists, and their inability to construct a state based on the fact that Israel occupies them. You do not mention the occupation. I'll leave that there because I need to focus on the motion, on the rest of the motion. I think this is a great opportunity to extend our hand in friendship to the people of Palestine. It's not a new thing. The trade unions do it. The academic institutions do it. Even in the healthcare system, we've got medical aid for Palestinians, where we have really strong partnership working with counterparts in the Palestinian territories, occupied Palestinian territories. So this is not a new thing. It's not an unusual thing. And I think it's a really welcome thing. In a time where every single day some of us wake up and watch the social media and see who else is dead, How many more have been killed over now? How many more children are hanging off, have their limbs hanging off there, or their faces blown off and their brains pouring out? We feel we need to do something. There are people in this city who care deeply for peace, for a solution to this conflict. It has to be a political solution. It has to be a diplomatic solution. It will not be a violent or terrorist solution, which is effectively what the Israeli state is doing to the Palestinian people right now. You know, well, and on the point about partnership with Israelis, towns and cities, I would be really comfortable with that if we can find a town and city and a mayor or an administration in the country of Israel which is prepared to accept a two-state solution, which is prepared to condemn the gross violation of human rights, the raping and the sodomizing of Palestinian prisoners and hostages, the genocidal bombing, daily bombing, the bombing of schools, hospitals. Once we get partners for peace on the Israeli side, let's absolutely have a conversation about joining a friendship arrangement with them too. But right now, the solidarity is needed with the people of Palestine who've been depleted and who are on their way to being exterminated. That's not my words. That's the International Court of Justice. That's Amnesty International. Plausible case for genocide, the extermination of the Palestinian people. That's what we're fighting here. And I extend my solidarity to the Palestinian people, absolutely. And I welcome this motion. And I hope that everyone in the council chamber rejects the amendment for its two-sidedness, which I don't think is entirely fair or balanced. And it tries to impose conditions that are much harder for Palestinians to achieve. And it absolutely ignores the extremist far-right ministers like Ben-Gvir and Smotrich in Israel who reject a two-state solution. And even Mr. Netanyahu, who's opposed a two-state solution for 20 plus years, has no intention of changing his mind. And therefore I support this article of friendship. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Akhtar. Councillor Duke, you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, are we going to go for the vote on the amendment now and then have a discussion about the full item? Because I feel it's getting a bit...
We're still on the amendment.
Right, okay.
Once everybody's spoken who wants to speak on the amendment, we'll then vote on the amendment. Okay. Is there anybody else wishes to speak on the amendment? Okay, then we go to the vote on the... Oh, did you reserve the right? And did I let you? Come on then.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This debate reflects exactly what our group meeting had, which went on for many hours, talking about this issue of every possible opinion going. And I was really proud of my group because there are strong opinions on this, on the issue as a whole. And our group does have a free vote on this. We would not even dream of whipping our MPs on something as important. But, sorry, excuse me.
Councillor Boswell, just be quiet, please, while he's speaking.
But let me just address some of the issues. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So let me just address some of the issues that have come up as to our amendment, because up until Councillor Akhtar said he wasn't keen on some part of it, not one of you has actually put forward a line you disagree with, wording you disagree with, a point you disagree with, so you should support it. Because this is an incredibly fractious and emotive topic, and nobody's not talking about the Israeli government. Benjamin Netanyahu is a crook, a tyrant, and probably a war criminal. I have no problem saying that. I also have no problem saying that Hamas is a prescribed organisation. Your party is now in government. If you want to change that prescription of Hamas, you can. You have the power to do it. It was only introduced fairly recently. It's your government now. And I'd like to just also point out, because there's been some sort of insinuation that people on this side somehow don't care or don't understand the complexities. We should remind you,
that the Lib Dems were the first national party to call for a ceasefire on this when Labour didn't. We were the only party at the time that had a Palestinian heritage MP in Layla Moran, who led very much the conscience of the Commons in this. So maybe tone down and realise what we're trying to do is about peace. And it's about understanding that words in this chamber, yes, they matter, but there are so much complexity in this. And we should remember, going right back to what Councillor Khan said at the start, this is a scoping document to look into it. And if you were running any sort of organisation, if you were planning ahead, why wouldn't you, if you're right at the beginning of figuring something out, not think, well, maybe we need to speak to both sides? You are just at the start of this process, and to say, actually, we want to go through the whole process and then we might think about the other side is inefficient and makes no sense. Councillor Darby's motion has nothing contentious in it that should be voted down. You should, unless you have different motives. And that's for you to decide within your conscience and within your party, because I know where Neil's heart in this is to stop suffering and to care about the people who are dying, whether they were the people that died on October the 7th, people that are dying right now, or people that have died over the decades of this awful, awful conflict. So maybe wind your necks in a little bit in terms of your judgment on us, because we are trying to do the right thing. And if you can't find something to disagree with it on this motion, then maybe you need to think about your motives in this, because I am absolutely sure our motives in this are genuine and pure. I urge you all to vote for this amendment.
Thanks, Councillor Potter. Anybody else wish to speak on the amendment? You can't, Councillor Akhtar. We'll go to the vote on the amendment to this report,
Recorded
please.
vote, please. Thank you. Request for a recorded vote, please, on the amendment and also on the main motion.
So we'll have a recorded vote on the amendment and then on the report. Okay.
Thank you, members. Starting in alphabetical order with Councillor Afzal.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Afzal. Councillor Akhtar.
Still against the amendment.
Councillor Atkins. Councillor Bailey. Councillor Boswell. Councillor Brooks. Councillor Brown. Councillor Close.
Against.
Councillor Crowe.
Against.
Councillor Darby. Councillor Duke. Councillor Dwyer. Councillor Gregg. Councillor Guise. Councillor Henshaw. Councillor Hindle. Councillor Holmes. Councillor Hull.
Against the amendment.
Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Jewell. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Khan. Councillor Kulbaki. Councillor Landless. Councillor Little. Councillor McMahon. Councillor Morgan. Councillor Nather. Councillor Patel. Councillor Peake. Councillor Potter. Councillor Raisbeck. Councillor Rawlinson. Councillor Saxena. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Van Mierlo. Councillor Varty. Councillor Voira. Councillor Ward. Councillor Mr. Whittam. Councillor Mrs. Whittam.
Against.
Councillor Wise. Thank you, members.
Right, we move on to the. Oh, sorry, we're waiting for the result. Right, councillors, the amendment has fallen. So we go back to the report as is in your packs. Before we vote on it, is there anyone who wants to speak? Councillor Brown?
Yeah, just briefly, it's been a very emotional debate. I do understand that. I just want to really clarify what this report is and it isn't. Obviously, this is not saying we're going to enter into a friendship arrangement. It's just joining an association that can facilitate that. And as Councillor Khan said, you know, we are committed, obviously, to listen to our community and respond to, you know, the suffering we're seeing within Palestine. And obviously, we feel this is a humanitarian way to do that as a city of sanctuary, in line with some of the concerns with the international community. Now, obviously, as part of that process, we have ongoing dialogue with both Muslim and Jewish communities, and we've met with the Jewish community recently, and as Councillor Khan said, we will consider a similar arrangement. I just think we're probably getting a little ahead of ourselves, because this report is basically beginning the process of joining the organisation that will then explore it. We've had a very intense debate and very powerful debate, but you know, as an authority, what I want to see, what we all want to see, is an end to the violence. You know, I'm looking at the news every day and hoping that the American president, whoever, can actually end this conflict so we have peace within the region, because you know that suffering is intolerable for everyone who's caught up in it in all communities within the region. So that's what I hope and pray happens. But in the meantime, we understand how powerfully people feel about it, but we're committed to continuing the dialogue with all communities. But obviously we need to respond to the significant number of people who's requested we look at this, and this is the first stage of doing it. So it's basically, you know, the first stage of a process that we're going through, and obviously I want to commend the Weeder for an excellent speech and also the work she's done to make sure we have an inclusive approach to what we do on this matter, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Councillor Brown. Before we go to the vote on this report, Councillor Khan, do you want to come back or not?
I think I'd just like to say that surprised by some of the comments and statements made here today. This was all in goodwill for our communities. It's about interfaith working, improving, you know, and strengthening, as I said very much early on, rather than causing divisions. And it is just, I'm going to get quite emotional here. I'm very sorry, Mr. Mayor. I've no personal political reasons behind this. It came to me, had the Jewish community come forward before the Muslim community and asked for this friendship arrangement, I would have done what I've done now. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. We'll move to the vote on this report. And it will be a named vote again, as we've been asked for.
Few members again, starting with Councillor Afzal.
For the main motion.
So just for clarity, that is Councillor Afzal. Councillor Akhtar.
Councillor Akhtar reporting, yes, in favour of the motion.
Councillor Atkins. Councillor Bailey. Councillor Boswell.
4.
Councillor Brooks. Councillor Brown. Councillor Close. Councillor Crowe.
4.
Councillor Derby. Councillor Duke. Councillor Dwyer. Councillor Gregg. Councillor Guise. Councillor Henshaw. Councillor Hindle. Councillor Holmes. Councillor Hull.
4.
Councillor Iqbal. Councillor Jewell. Councillor Kelly. Councillor Khan. Councillor Kulbaki. Councillor Landless. Councillor Little. Councillor McMahon. Councillor Morgan. Councillor Natha. Councillor Patel. Councillor Peake. Councillor Potter. Councillor Raisbeck. Councillor Rawlinson. Councillor Saxena. Councillor Thompson. Councillor Van Mierlo. Councillor Varty. Councillor Vora. Councillor Ward. Councillor Mr. Whitton. Councillor Mrs. Whittam.
Abstain.
Councillor Wise. Thank you, members.
Right, listen up, councillors. For the report, 30, against 3, abstentions 9, so the report is carried. We're going to do another couple of items before we have a break, okay? So the sooner we get through them, the better, Mr. Councillor Potter. That doesn't count for anything with you, Councillor Potter. Actually, no, 8 pages. Item 8 is a report on visual surveillance. A copy of an alteration to this report is on your seats, as further information was required to be put before you related to CCTV also being installed at the Guildhall, as well as the Harris, prior to members making a decision on the matter. Councillor, is Councillor Desire, he's not here, is he? Oh, Councillor Rawlinson moving the report. Thank you.
The report speaks for itself, really. This is CCTV for our buildings. First of all, the Harris and some in the Guildhall. Obviously, Harris reopening next year, and bringing the Guildhall back to life as well. This is about security and safety. It is expensive, but the equipment we have is out of date. Absolutely needs replacing, but also the new stuff will be centrally monitored, hopefully going forward, and it will be more efficient and effective. And obviously, the Harris is full of amazing things that we need to protect. The people that work there as well, Guildhall, eventually the town hall, and maybe other buildings as well. So hopefully you can support. Sorry, I'll just mention the alteration. I think you've all got it. It's just a few words extra about the Guildhall.
Have we got a seconder for this report? Thank you, Councillor Brown. Anyone wish to speak on this report? Oh, shall we go to the vote then? All those in favour of accepting this report, please show. Oh, and me, yeah. Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Item 9 is a report on asylum seekers dispersal funding. Councillor Khan, will you be moving this report?
Yes, I will be, if I can find it. Yeah, where are we? Yes, we are. Yeah, this report is to accept funded budget increase for asylum dispersal funding for 2024-2025 to the amount of 444,000 for that year period. This funding is extra funding that's come to us for some of the work that we've done and the expansion, the ban that was lifted on local authorities, dispersal being widened so that more councils and authorities would accept asylum seekers into, the cities. We've already started working and looking at how the expenditure will be made. We have now a dedicated coordinator for asylum seeking families and also for refugees as well. We're further looking at this. We do acknowledge and understand the pressures that we have on housing that we face, and especially large houses for refugee families. So this is going to be part and parcel of what we're going to be looking at going into the future, how we may well be spending extra money from this pot of funding. It is ring fence funding, and it is only for asylum seekers and refugees. So the decision required, Mr. Mayor, is to accept the Home Office funding of 44,000 and delegate the acceptance of further funding for 24-25 to the Executive Member for Resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Khan. Is the report seconded? Thank you, Councillor Rawlinson. Any questions on the report? Councillor Whittam?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a quick comment and a question, Councillor Khan. It's great we've got the increase in funding, which is good. Rightly, anybody that seeks asylum, whether they be a refugee or a genuine asylum seeker, needs our support. We're a city of sanctuary, has already been mentioned. However, and anyone that's watched the Freddie Flintoff documentary can't fail to be moved by Adnan's story, going through 6 countries, being beaten up by border guards, getting here, leaving his family at 15 years old. Those people deserve our support, and I think it's absolutely right that this should come before us. Can we, though, can the council assure us that we will be giving Preston, people that lived in Preston all their lives, are getting the same level of support that asylum seekers and refugees will get? Because I think that's hugely important. We're aware that there are pensioners living in bed and breakfast, temporary accommodation, that have been for some time. And it's great that we're supporting people that need it, but there are people that live here and have lived here all their lives that deserve that equal support. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishes to? Oh, sorry. Yeah, Matthew. Councillor Khan, do you wish to come back before the vote?
Yeah, I'd just like to thank you, Mr. Councillor Whittam, just to say that this is dedicated, ring-fenced funding for this particular community. Obviously, as a council, whatever funding we receive for the wider community, like Household Support Fund and other forms of funding, that is dedicated for for the wider community. And we would ensure, and we do, and we understand the pressures that the different communities face within Preston. So we look to the current government as what other funding will be available, for us to meet the needs of older people and other communities as well. Thank you.
Okay, councillor Rawlinson.
Just for information, really. It's a good question, and that's why this Labour group wants to build council housing, so that there's no shortage of accommodation, affordable accommodation for people. And we are also looking at solutions to the temporary accommodation issues that we have that have been somewhat forced upon us, and the costs of putting people in private sector temporary accommodation. We're looking at a solution to that too. So yes, is the answer.
Right, we'll move to the vote on this report. Just hold your breath a minute. Councillor Hull. All those in favour of this report, please show. Have we anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The report's accepted. As we're doing so well, we'll crack on a bit longer. Item 10 is Workwell Vanguard. It's a report on the Workwell Vanguard programme, October 2024 to March 2026. Councillor Brown, are you moving this report?
Mr. Mayor, I am. Thank you very much. Yeah, quite a simple report, really. This is some money we've been successful in getting from the Integrated Care Board. So this is basically aimed at helping disabled workers to either remain or gain employment if they've lost their jobs in the last 3 to 6 months. So the Integrated Care Board, of which were, I believe, Councillor Coupland's a member, has successfully applied to the DWP to be one of 15 Vanguard areas to test new approaches helping people whose employment is threatened by their health, by their disability or ill health. The funding arrangements mean we need to move really quickly. So what needs to happen is we need to move forward with a plan, actually by tomorrow, and then we need to actually start the work in October. So the recommendation of officers is that you do actually move ahead with existing organisations that we're working with through the Move Forward in Investing Youth programmes through UK Shared Prosperity. So the work will be delivered by our local VCFS sector. So obviously a big thanks to our members and our officers for bringing £700,000 into our community to help those who are disabled either retain work or find work if they're out of work. What will happen is that we expect to work with over 700 residents over the next 18 months in Preston. Each will receive a personalised plan to either return to work or thrive in work through a multi-agency approach, which will include local GPs, the Job Centre Plus and local employers. And obviously we need to work with progressive employees to ensure we deliver reasonable adjustments to remove the disadvantage that disabled residents face. We want to focus particularly on ethnic minorities, ex-offenders and young people because they tend to be disproportionately affected by work-related issues if they're within those protected characteristics. And then also what we're going to do as well is we're going to feed into a national evaluation of how best to support those struggling in work due to health or disability. Now, there's been 1 or 2 questions from my members about this programme. Obviously, we've had, I will say this, beginning with the 2010 to 2015 Lib Dem Conservative Coalition, a very brutal benefits regime towards disabled individuals within our community with sanction and the rest of it. There's no compulsion to take part on this, and there's no evidence or threat of them losing their benefits if they do take part of it. We're trying to support our disabled and residents who aren't that well to actually remain in jobs and actually support them through that process. So the decisions required are at 3.5. It's been at 2.1. It's been pointed out that 3.5 doesn't read particularly well around the numbers who are said to be currently out of work. I think it says 30,000 out of 10,000. So obviously we need to check those figures and get back to council. So the decisions are at paragraph 2.1 and there are 6 bullet points. So I'm happy to and proud to present this, Mr. Mayor. Thank you very much.
Have we got a seconder for this report? Councillor Hull, you seconding this report? Thank you. Do you want to speak on it? We're all grateful for that. Thank you. We'll move to the report. We'll move to the vote on this report, please. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. Anyone against? Any abstentions? Thank you. The report's accepted, carried. We're going to have a break. So we'll be back in here. What's time now? 4:15 on the dot. No lateners, all right? Thank you. Be seated. Right, we move on to item 11. It's a report on Active Preston Levelling Up Fund. Councillor Brown, will you be moving this report?
Mr. Mayor will be. I'm sure colleagues may wish to say one or two things as well. Obviously, that is their right. A bit of history, Mr. Mayor. As we know, the government made a Levelling Up Fund announcement in January 2023, and Preston is one of 111 successful applications from a total of 525 submissions. We awarded a £20 million Levelling Up Fund grant as part of an overall £24.1 million Levelling Up programme. And in February 2023, Council received a detailed report on the implementation of the Levelling Up Fund programme and approved a set of detailed recommendations to guide the next stages of implementation. There has been significant progress so far, especially with the tram bridge replacement, but however, the whole scheme has experienced significant and often unexpected challenges. We face a situation that with an award of £20 million, and you've got to remember, it's not just the Ashton Park scheme, all these schemes that are interlinked together, that was the whole idea behind it. The volatility of markets and the impact of build cost inflation has had a major impact on the full deliverability of an extensive programme of work within the constraint of a fixed grant award. We're also aware as an authority, and we need to be a listening council, of the significant resistance faced, including public campaigns regarding the proposed sports hub and 3G pitch at Ashton Park, and we will respond to that appropriately. The significant increase in cost estimates has created a potential £5 million overspend, which needs us to revise our delivery priorities within the programme. And we'll also need to seek approval from the department concerned. The report will set out proposals for a revised Active Preston programme that will deliver a range of major investments in active travel, parks and sports provision, and enables the best effective use of the funding available in those circumstances. For clarity, this will include the removal of the original Ashton Park proposals, including the 3G pitch, alongside the much smaller project, the Mobility Hub. We also intend to include an extension to pedestrianisation and cycle-friendly projects at Orchard Street. So this means, to summarise, that the approved Levelling Up plan, if it goes ahead today, will see the regeneration of more Waverley and Grange parks, investment in the active travel infrastructure cycle routes and links on Queen Street, Avon Lane and Frygate Orchard Street, alongside the new River Ribble foot cycle bridge crossing. Whilst Ashton Park will be removed from its original iteration, the council is still committed to improve existing grass facilities there with developer contribution, and will seek match funding to do so. And we wish to further improve all our parks, including Ashton Park, and if resources allow, we will look to do that through alternative funding arrangements. However, a similar style scheme to the previous proposals with the 3G pitch will not be part of our plans. I must say, within our Labour group, the ruling group, there have been differing views in our group. I believe that the position of all members has been one that's been honourable and positive, and I think the intention has been positive. We have to remember we're a diverse working class community. We've been starved of resources. We have the worst forms of austerity imposed on our communities by a Conservative-led government supported by the Liberal Democrats for the first 5 years. The levels of cuts we imposed on those communities, you might laugh, these are real life-changing cuts that you impose on our communities. So we took the first opportunity to grab this funding. And the intention was to lift the life chances of young people who've been left behind by Conservative and Liberal Democrat austerity free market economics. However, with this previous Conservative government sadly consigned to history with a very small number they have now of MPs, the Levelling Up Fund agenda has been inflexible, and it's put pressure on an already cash-strapped authority that's had austerity imposed on us with little capacity for flexibility, and I would even say member involvement in decision making. Things have happened very quickly in those circumstances. Obviously, Councillor Bailey and others that were in favour of the original proposal, that the intention was to obviously help those communities, help children and young people who've been denied those opportunities for the facilities. However, obviously, we need to think again. we need to look at where we are, and we need obviously to listen to public opinion. The reality is that there have been over 2,000 people opposed to the current development. We're not arrogant, we do listen, we don't all think the same, we're human beings. So we're moving forward with a revised set of proposals. Unlike the previous scheme, some in our group will be disappointed, others will be happy. But obviously we think we've got the best deal here to move forward in a positive way. As a Labour Council, we're committed to and have successfully over the years bid for significant additional resources to invest in our parks. More park and the rest of it. You know, we've seen sporting facilities there. We've had the skate park within Ashton Park itself. There's going to be investment in the basketball courts through shared prosperity. Through shared prosperity money, we put money into grassroots football teams, and obviously there's going to be a significant investment within football facilities within Waverley and within Waverley Park and the other park scheme that's going to continue. However, with the finances being what they are and public opinion being what they are, we think it's right to think again and support a wider programme that has full community support. It is a quite important component that whatever we do through Levelling Up, the old Levelling Up scheme, that we do have support from the community. And this is an Ashton Park in its previous iteration is the one scheme where there obviously is not community support, and the department are aware of that. So what we're suggesting is that council does recommend the scope of the revised Active Preston programme set out in paragraph 3.14 to 3.19, subject to being approved by government and also the programme being delivered within the maximum Levelling Up Fund budget allocation, including match funding. Obviously, we need to submit what's known as a project adjustment request form to government. And even if we'd gone ahead with the original proposals, with it being £5 million overspent, we'd have had to do that anyway. We'd had to see cuts to Waverley Park and the other parts we invested in within Preston, as well as the cycle and pedestrian facilities that we have. So obviously what we're doing is we're listening to public opinion, we're listening to the fact that the government have actually underfunded us to deliver this, which is a reality of it with the previous government and the kind of policies that we imposed on communities, and we hope the council can support this. We think it's a sensible, pragmatic and balanced way to deal with it. And one final thing for me, and I'm really pleased we have had a change in government, we really need to move beyond these competitive, capital-intensive bidding projects, which Levelling Up was. We need to have a return to properly funded and resourced local government with decent powers, so we can choose with decent funding to invest where we want to, including potentially in places like Ashton Park. It should not be tied to these capital-intensive schemes, which basically put pressure on already cash-strapped authorities. And the reality is, even if we've gone ahead with the old Ashton Park proposals, there'd have to be cuts to Moor Park, there'd have to be cuts to Waverley Park, and these are the most deprived areas within our communities that need the investment which they deserve. So the decision again is at 3.14 to 3.19. I'm glad we've all had a coffee, because you know there'll be lots of opinions on this, and I hope council can support these revised proposals, which I think are a pretty good deal and a pretty balanced set of proposals in terms of the fact that we find ourselves in serious issues with the fact that we're over budget by £5 million due to external factors we can't control. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Is there a seconder for this report? Do you wish to speak now or wait? Thank you, Councillor White. Anybody else want to speak about this report? Councillor Jewell, please.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I would just like to make it clear to the council that we had hoped to submit an amendment to this that reflected the flagship projects of this, that included Ashton Park, which was over 50% of that Levelling Up Fund bid, as well as the old tram bridge. And then there's two projects in all of this that have Section 106 money, that is Ashton Park and Waverley Park. So our thinking around this, if we had been presented with this position, would have been different. But unfortunately, we were advised by the Section 151 officer that they needed more time for expert advice as to what we were proposing. And on that basis, unfortunately, we have not been able to bring that amendment forward. But on this, basic substantive paper, I have to put myself in the position, being a project manager outside of the council, I put this situation, if I was in front of my director or board of directors in that environment. And I can only suggest that I wouldn't be in their office for very long. I would have probably been emitted with my head held high and my legs held higher, and I wouldn't be welcomed back. Because quite frankly, this is a lesson on how not to do a bid. Councillor Brown mentioned about how the government underfunded this. That's not quite the truth, is it? Because we made a bid for this. It was our bid, and it was that bid that was undercosted. And when it went out to the market, you realized that there was more cost associated with it. And as such, you couldn't fund all of the projects you would have liked to have funded. So the question that intrigues me is whether this proposal, the Ashton Park proposal, would have been withdrawn, given those circumstances, if Labour had actually won the 2 elections in Lear and Larches. It's an interesting question, because the cynic might suggest that actually you lost 2 seats there, so you've penalised the people of Lear and Larches and moved all of these projects back to what you consider to be Labour areas. But of course, that would only be the cynic who would think that. So the reason why I say this is a sort of case example where things don't go right is because every bid needs to have the right checks and balances. And you don't actually proceed unless you meet those thresholds. And by virtue of what we have before us today, that clearly was not undertaken. Absolutely clearly. And there may be some people in this office who feel quite uncomfortable about that, and you should. Because if we put this to, it was all the previous government's fault, if we put this to, there were wild inflationary pressures that put us, wrong-footed us, we are not going to learn the lessons of this. And if I could just sort of quote Councillor Hindle in a public meeting recently, mentioning about how the Harris was spiralling out of control. There is a bit of a theme going on here. That there is a theme going on here. I think as a matter of public record, I think we can demonstrate that was the case. So there is a theme going on here about how this administration controls its costs, its bids, and the projects it's supposed to deliver. And my appeal to you all is please scrutinise what has happened here and learn the lessons, because I actually take no delight. When I heard that the Ashton project was going to be completely scrapped, I took no delight that there is now not going to be any investment, or not the type of investment we were looking for, as per our amended notice of motion back in November, in Ashton Park. So I think my appeal is for the ruling group to take a good, hard, honest look at themselves, because there are lessons to be learned here. And we are all in this chamber to improve the lives of our residents and of Prestonians. I could go into sort of ripping Labour apart a bit more on this, but I won't do, because I genuinely want us, for every pound of taxpayers' money, to apply that effectively for the people of Preston. And this has demonstrated. Section 106 monies for Ashton Park. You mentioned about you might be able to do something for the pitches. I'm not too sure what you can do for 600,000, quite frankly. And there is a divergence order, I may have got the terminology wrong, that needs to go back to the to the developer. The developer has already asked for the money back. So I think it's a bit disingenuous to suggest that actually, honest gov, we'll do something with that Section 106 money. It's lost because of the actions of this Labour group. So what's the point of me standing up? It's an honest appeal. It's an honest appeal for you to look at yourselves and how you manage your projects, because continually wasting money, continually going overspent, continually underbidding on work
Councillor, your time's up.
isn't what Preston needs. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Gregg.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mike touched on most of the things I wanted to say. Councillor Brown touched on that it's government's fault dating back years and years now. However, I don't believe the last government wrote this bid for the Levelling Up Fund. So it was a Labour bid for £20 million. And he's blaming the Tories for giving the council £20 million to spend. Labour brought it to full council twice and it was voted on. They also sent it off to planning and that was voted on. So yeah, I do also think it does look like that with the election and by-election that Labour do want to punish the residents of Lear and Lodges with Ashton Park. They could have implemented something in the revised document, such as draining the pitches, keeping some in use, a compromise. So yeah, I just wanted to touch on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gregg. Councillor Ward. No, not yet. You're last. Was it?
Councillor Little, thank you.
Councillor Little, please.
Hello, I'd first like to say hello to everybody. I'm the new councillor for Lear and Larches, just won in the last by-election. And with that, I just want to thank Mark for his comments, and I want to agree with most of what he was saying. I'd also like to take a chance to thank Anne and the friends of the Ashton Park community who have shown support for Ashton Park as well. It's with a heart that's sunk really for the loss of the investment that we're going to get into our community now. We were against the full all singing and all dancing investment into Ashton Park, and we all know the position that we held. And it is such a shame now that that complete thing is just being pulled away and there is nothing to fill that void of investment. Ashton Park is a facility. There are laughs being carried out over the other side, which is great. I have 2 young children that use that park. Throughout the winter, it is unusable. The drainage on the side of the park is absolutely ridiculous, and we have to go onto the road to use the facilities that are there. It was good that we got funding secured, but the complete mismanagement of that funding means now the residents in Ashton Park is actually being penalised. I hope lessons are learned, and I would like to ask what the plan is for Ashton Park now that there's nothing there for us. Thank you.
Welcome, councillor. Councillor Kelly, please.
I welcome the investment in the other parks in this city, but I take you back to the original report in 2018, the Lancashire playing field strategy, which we commissioned and we agreed in this council, recognised that that part of the city does not have active football pitches. But for those of us, I had the portfolio of sports, I had calls with Lancashire FA during the lockdown, and the fact when UCLan took the football pitches off us, there were 1,500 players, over 100 teams at the most pivotal time coming out of lockdown weren't able to play because we didn't have the right amount of pitches. It cost you 80 to 90,000 for the drainage on each of the pitches, and originally Ashton had 12 pitches on it. So and at the moment, as you've just said yourself, they're They're unplayable in the winter. They're virtually unwalkable at times as well because of the sogginess. The only way we'll ever get over that is the fact that you know, you need to do. Kids need to play. Okay, we sit there, we criticize children for being on Xboxes, and we don't give them anywhere to play because we don't want development or we don't want something to happen on a park. I make no apology because that report said categorically we need more pitches. And I've seen these coaches on a call with the FA and with the Lancashire FA, and these guys give their lives over to watching people play football. And Freddie, you know about this from your football, just how important it is for the mental health of our children. So yes, we'll be having some investment in the other element. I just know that this part of the city has no football pitches. Where do you send them to play? If we're carbon free, they have to drive to South Ribble, they have to drive to other areas to play pitches.
Thank you, Councillor Kelly. Councillor Thompson next, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to object to this report, but it is a real shame that the Ashton football facility has been pulled. I think it was one of the most useful to the people of Preston. And I can understand, I think it's a bit Machiavellian to think that the Labour have cooked up, they're going to punish the people of Lear. I don't think that's quite the case. But I think they've been overtaken by costs, and also, you know, the bids and everything. There's a lot came in, and are we overstretching our staff with these sorts of bids? And I think we do have to be a bit more careful. I mean, there's a couple of reports in here. I don't really want to say something, but I will. A couple of reports in here that really need some more attention before they come to council. I think they're a bit lightweight. So it's unfortunate, and the only people that have suffered is the people of Preston who want the football pitches. I think it's unfortunate, but that's where we are. We are subject to a lot of global influences, especially with prices of building materials, etc. So it's unfortunate, but we are where we are, and we'll go forward from there. I hope that going forward in the future, we can actually make up some ground for the lack of this particular facility. Otherwise, I'm quite happy to accept the report. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Potter, you're next to last, you're not last.
Thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Always the warmer back to Councillor Hull, always fun. Yeah, let's, Mark was being, Councillor Jewell was being very considered. I'm going to be less so. This has been the most impressive act by a Labour administration I can remember to annoy absolutely everyone from every side. The people that didn't want it, now the people that did want it. And again, we talk about in previous items today, your arrogance in not listening to people. You put yourself in this position, and I did have a little chuckle before when Councillor Thompson was talking about leaked reports from this chamber. The amount of leaks from the Labour Party in Preston, riven by division. I mean, you've got more leaks than the Titanic at the moment. It is absolutely embarrassing to yourselves. We know half your discussions in your group meetings before they're even come to council because you guys keep on making colossal mistakes. And Councillor Thompson was saying it might not be conspiracy in terms of you don't want to punish the people of Lear and Larches and Ashton. Well, if it's not conspiracy, it's screw up. And you can pick which one you want, because actually it is a pattern within the Labour Party in this chamber where you take a moral high ground, you think you know best, and then you end up having to back down later on, or revising your budgets, or saying costs are spiralling out of control. And then you have the gall to wonder why people like us think, well, maybe you're not doing as good a job as what you're supposed to be doing. And I also take a little bit of an issue about this report, because like Councillor Jewell said, we wanted to amend it because this pleased no one. And I was the one that rang Mark to say when Ashton Park was getting scrapped. And I said, and we all within the Lib Dems take no joy in this whatsoever, because I walk my dog on Ashton Park. It is virtually unusable for last parts. And actually our position was very clear last year where we thought you had the wrong sort of investment going into Ashton Park, and we were right, and then we have been proven right by this, that actually you couldn't take the community along. And it was probably Councillor Darby at the time that said, you want to do a community asset without taking the community with you. And we told you that it would end up biting you. And just a little bit of how badly it has bitten you is a by-election during a general election is virtually impossible for Lib Dems to win. There were 40 odd in the general election, and Lib Dems gained just one across the whole country, and it was in Leah Larches, partly because Sean's a brilliant candidate, partly because Mark ran a brilliant campaign, but partly because your arrogance and your infighting and your blooming mindedness brought this upon yourself. And so, but now we have to deal with it, that the people of Ashton, of which I am one, I live on Allwich Drive, have to deal with your incompetence by getting no investment in a part that desperately needs it. So we have a really difficult situation. We have a difficult vote today, because do we go with your plan to scrap the scheme, causing massive disappointment to the people that wanted some investment into the park, or do we try and vote this down with other members, maybe even some people from your old side if they haven't been whipped into doing what they're told? But then what would that mean if we voted it down? What would mean is probably it puts at risk all projects, the tram bridge, everything. So we are within a rock and a hard place. But you know what? And when we had our group meeting, we said, and I can't remember who said it, this is not our mess to fix, it's yours. And if you think that having annoyed every single person in this debate, both people for it, against it, indifferent, the residents in Leah Larches, the residents in Ashton, that you think doing this is going to save you politically, it's not. It just highlights how incompetent you are and how badly run this has been. And I'm embarrassed for you. I'm embarrassed for the people of Preston. And as soon as we can start giving you an ounce of credibility and some humility in your decisions, I think it will serve you all a lot better. So as a group, we are going to abstain on this, because this isn't our mess. It is all yours.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Hull, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's just that there are so many fallacious points that have been made by the Liberals that I just couldn't let this go. I mean, with regards to Councillor Jewell seems to think that there's such a thing as a Section 151 officer. We're cut to the bone at the moment. You referred to a Section 151 officer, unless you've made a mistake.
Excuse me, Councillor Hull.
Yeah.
A section, what he was referring to, Section 106 money.
Yes, 106 money.
We have a Section 151 officer. The lady sat here. She's the city treasurer.
I'm very grateful, Mr. Mayor, but nevertheless, for the Liberals to say that it is that Ashton has been penalised by having 2 Liberal councillors, I have to agree with. I mean, but to call it being penalised is a rather strange position. If you looked at the report, the actual costings for Ashton would have had a shortfall of £5 million. That would have impacted badly on lots of the other things that come from this levelling up fund, including the bridge in the park, which is something that the Liberals should be all over because it's a popular issue. And when you say with regards to the people of Preston wanting football pitches, there are football pitches in West Preston, and there are those football pitches that belong to the university, for example. There are other football pitches that can be put in the west side of Preston. But there are football pitches in the west side of Preston, and the overwhelming majority of people with regards to the Ashton Park, which is in my ward, the footprint of it, Mr. Mayor. The first I knew of this development was at a public meeting, though, but that's beside the point. But the actual footprint of Ashton Park is in the Ashton ward, which I represent. And the people who live around that park have made it quite obvious, as the Liberals know without playing politics, that they want no football pitches with regards to a 3G on that park. there can be football pitches just as there are on the listed part, the Moor Park, which was in the ward that I last represented it for the most part for 20 years, which was called St George's Ward. And we had no problems at all with the Moor Park when we spent £10 million on it with drainage and everything else. But with regards to the Ashton Park, I should say to all members of this council that if you actually want to pin your colours to the mast truly for what's best for Preston, then you will approve what's going into this report and not be lily-livered liberals who are looking for the nearest fence to sit on, but actually pin your colours to the mast. If you don't agree with it, don't. If you do, do. But don't try to sort of play politics with it, because that doesn't rub in this chamber and it doesn't rub in this city. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hull. Councillor Dwyer, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In all good faith, I can't support this report, and with good consideration of it in the interest of the people of West Preston and of Preston itself. To me, this report represents fear in the face of ambition and in facing the future. And this is a fear that has been sown first by those who believe that consultation counts as a referendum, and then revelled in by our Liberal Democrat friends opposite. Much needed provision will remain much needed, and there will be a great deal of regret, I feel, for years to come among those in this room. And I'm going to get my regret out of the way quickly by regretting that I will be abstaining on this item. Now, I'm proud of the fact that we have a progressive council, an ambitious, forward-looking council and agenda. Now, I'm also proud of our manifesto, on which members on this side have been elected year on year. And for the last 2 years, investment, much needed investment in Ashton Park, has been one of those manifesto pledges. And I'm disappointed at the prospect that we may have to break that today. I'm also concerned that this decision today represents an existential moment in the consideration of our relationships with stakeholders, with government, and in our record and reputation for delivery in Preston. We're set to deny the opportunity of a once-in-a-generation investment, and it's unfortunately my firm belief that this will be to the detriment of the residents of West Preston, including myself, where I've lived all my life, and to the wider residents of Preston who need provision like this. So it is, again, to my regret, to my party, to my leader, and to this council itself, I will be abstaining.
Thank you, Councillor Dwyer. Councillor Rawlingson.
So it should be noted that Councillor Potter didn't speak to the report at all, did he? He never mentioned it at all. He just attacked us. So I'm about to do the same. So I'm hoping you'll allow it. Lib Dems are flip-flopped yet again on this issue. They were all for the Levelling Up Fund bid and Ashton Park. And then when there was obviously some opposition and they could gain some, seats and gain some votes, they flip-flopped, went the other way, tried the amendment. And now, today, they're lamenting the loss of the old scheme. I mean, which one is it? What's it going to be next week? Was it undercosted? Was it undercosted? As Councillor Thompson said, he knows certain areas of construction costs have rocketed. Some concrete products have gone up 60% in the last few years. How do you cost that in a bid like this? You can make your contingencies bigger. If you put a bid in with a 60% contingency, they'd throw it back at you. They'd laugh at you. How do you do that exactly? And if we did it wrong, why didn't you tell us we'd done it wrong? You're scrutiny. You're the opposition. Not once did you tell us we'd undercosted it. Not at all. You show me the evidence. So lessons, is the lessons, well, the biggest lesson I've learned, well, I didn't learn it because I didn't want to bid in the first place. I've said that all along. When we bid and we won, I got behind it. Of course I did. It's money for Preston. But, the biggest lesson is don't bid for crap Tory schemes. Well, we won't have to do that for a while, will we? So that's something. There's lessons for other people here too. You know, we had a councillor who dedicated his life to politics, to the Labour Party, as an MP, as a councillor, county councillor. The way he was treated by some members of the public is disgusting. They need to look at themselves hard. Some of these so-called campaigners shouting and swearing, calling us corrupt and liars constantly all over social media, making stories up about councillors and the scheme. I've got the screenshots from social media. This is the stuff that was going round Lear and Larches. No doubt some of these people over here helped spread it around. You know, things like we'd already given the whole scheme.
Raise a point of order, please. Could I raise a point of order, please?
So I have no doubt. I've no doubt about that fact. You know, nonsense stories.
Hang on a minute, Councillor Rawlinson. Just hang on a minute, please. Councillor Jewell, you have a point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm prepared to let so much go, but there comes a point in which I do have to call a point of order on a number of assertions that Councillor Rawlinson has made. One, the Liberal Democrat position.
Point of order is about the Constitution. What have I done wrong under the Constitution? No, not in the middle of my speech. You can't.
Councillor Rawlinson, just hang on a minute, please. If it's not a point of order on the Constitution, Councillor Dew, you'll have to sit down.
But it is a point of personal clarification, Mr. Mayor.
That's it's not a point of order, so we'll accept that. So sit down, let him finish, and then Councillor Rawlinson, continue.
There were things going around the community. One of them was that Councillor Borrell wasn't a councillor when he was on planning committee. I mean, it's just absurd things like that. Another one that we'd given the whole scheme to Preston North End already for their academy. It's no good to Preston North End. They need an indoor pitch. There was other things. You know, it's not just lessons for us here. Yes, it's been a saga, and nobody wanted to go back and forth. But here we are, and yeah, of course we'll learn lessons from it. There's lots of other people need to learn lessons from this too, especially the opposition. Comments like continually wasting money from Councillor Jewell, you know, it's an easy throwaway comment. You just say it, but you don't back it up with anything. The fact is, you know, we're delivering more for Preston now than this council's ever done. Huge programmes with half the money and half the staff because of you. I don't know what to say anymore. I mean, I'm just waiting for the Lib Dems to flip-flop again somehow. There's still time in this meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Rawlinson. Anyone else? Hang on. You've already spoken, Councillor Jewell. Have you not? Councillor Jewell.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just can't allow some of these comments to pass. And so the clarification I would like to give, Mr. Mayor, is there was some reference to the Lib Dems flip-flopping and wanting to go back to the original scheme. That has never been our position. The notice of motion, the amendment that we put forward, and I think it was back in November, it was before I was formally a councillor here, well, before I was a councillor, actually put forward a revised scheme that didn't include the 3G, that didn't include the 120 car park space central to the park, and didn't include the two-storey building, but it did say we wanted investment in the drainage, improving the grass pitches and a better single-storey changing rooms. That has been consistently the Lib Dems position. And what I'd hoped to put forward, Mr. Mayor, in a notice of motion, which unfortunately we couldn't bring to this meeting, was exactly that scheme for Ashton Park. And I particularly want to make reference to Councillor Rawlinson's suggestion that we were in some way behind some of the social media posts. I can absolutely guarantee we were not behind a lot of the vile that was going about at that time. And I am aware of it, but we were not behind it. And I think that is a scurrilous suggestion, and we completely deny it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Jewell. Councillor Potter, you've had your say. Shush, shush. Councillor Dew, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I just wanted to make the small point that Councillor Rawlinson has said that they don't waste money. According to this, there's £851,546 of sunk costs that's gone against the Ashton Park scheme, but there's absolutely nothing to show for it. So if that isn't a waste of money, I don't know what is. And just going back to the item about making this decision because you need to listen to the public, Councillor Borrow forced this Ashton Park proposal through. The vast majority of the public wanted a compromise. They didn't want the full scheme we put forward. I specifically asked you, Councillor Rawlinson, what would happen if the costs went over budget, particularly because of my own experience of project and programme management. I could see it coming. I asked you about it. I said, would that mean, tongue in cheek, you just remove the 3G pitch? And you told me, no, we will just find that from borrowings. So what you have done today is shown an absolute lack of ability to listen to the public still, and a lack of ability to compromise and actually do what the public wanted this time. So I'm afraid saying that we're behind Facebook posts, most of us were not in that group, because those of us that sit on planning have had nothing to say about this whole matter all along to maintain our objectivity and listen to both sides. So I absolutely refute being tarred with that brush. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Duke. Councillor Brooks.
Yeah, thank you. I want to talk in support of this report. Facts of the matter are that there is a £5 million deficit there. All the opposition so far has not come up with what would they sacrifice. What would you sacrifice to do that shortfall in the funding? That is the key question. The other point of it is that the Lib Dems amendment previously was about a proposed scheme removing the 3G pitch. The 3G pitch is actually a fundamental part of this scheme. There was no match funding if there was no 3G. So your argument about let's have the cake and eat it just doesn't wash. You know, I actually questioned this stuff myself. And again, there are Lib Dem members on planning that had ample job opportunity there to come back about the costings and other things related to that matter that I sat on and didn't really hear. So I think it's a bit totally disingenuous now to try and do political mileage, attacking people and saying that we've undercut and undersold things because political gain, because we lost a seat, because that is just simply not true. Enough of us here have got our constituencies very honourable to them. They do listen to them and they speak on their behalf. But we are here in representing people of Preston. So my question is again to those people who are opposing it, what are you going to sacrifice to make up that shortfall? Because I'm quite interested to hear it and generally do want to hear it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brooks. Councillor Darby, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Rawlinson said that we couldn't name any figures, and
Councillor Duke has quite rightly provided a very good figure of £850,000. Now, we're lucky enough that I know that the government is writing that off for us, but nonetheless, that is taxpayers' money that has been wasted because this scheme is not being allowed to go any further. You talk about what would we do instead. We've been very clear about what we want to do with the amendment that we put forward back in November, as Councillor Jewell has very rightly said. And Councillor Jewell also did an awful lot of work earlier this week to try and bring forward an amendment to today, which sadly isn't possible because of the dead end that you've run us down into. It's absolutely ridiculous. The shortfall that we've ended up with, the reputational damage to this council, and just the sheer incompetence that's come forward. And I have to say, a large part of the money that we're looking, well, not a large part, a portion of the money that we're looking at here is £600,000 worth of Section 106 money that came from Ingle Golf Course. Now, many of you might remember that in Ingle and Tanton, as it was at the time, we fought for a very long time to try and save that golf course as an open space. In fact, it was designated as an area of major open space on the local plan, and yet we let it go through on the basis that we were going to get sporting provision back out of it. We were supposed to get some of the PNE training ground on it. That's not happening anymore. We were supposed to get £600,000 of money to go into sporting facilities on Ashton Park. That's not going to happen anymore. We're in danger of losing this £600,000 altogether, which means that the people of England and Sandston have had to put up with losing their golf course, and we're getting absolutely nothing back from it whatsoever. The incompetence from this council has been absolutely staggering on this issue. And people in my ward are going to be furious about that.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. Now, anybody else wish to speak? No. Councillor Wise, do you want to speak on this?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. I've listened carefully to this debate, and actually, I feel as though Councillor Jewell has been attacking the officers, because actually, the budget, when we put in our bid, was actually drawn up by the officers. In all good faith, I have to say, this is not at all a criticism of the officers. So they came up with a scheme that at that time fitted in with what we should do in terms of bidding for this money. The fact is, and it isn't our fault that costs have risen, and actually costs have risen since the council made its decision first in December and then in February. And so the fact is that unfortunately we're in the unfortunate situation where now, if we go ahead with the existing proposal, we're £5 million over budget. Now, obviously, we haven't had the Liberal Democrat amendment, but I did see it, or I saw a version of it. And it was interesting because in your amendment, had you been allowed to put it, Moore Park, Friargate South, the North-South link, Queen Street East-West link would all be sacrificed. Well, I'm totally opposed to that. We've actually just earlier today talked about the climate jury report, which actually said about cycling. We want to encourage people in Preston to cycle. If we're scrapping the east-west route, we're scrapping a cycling route. If we're actually not managing to do what we want to do on the north-south route, we're actually impacting on cycling. So, yeah, it's a hard decision that we've got to make today. But I feel that what the officers have come up with is the best for us as a council to take forward. Yes, we are concerned about Ashton Park. And if you look at paragraph 3.25, it says it's worthwhile noting that there remains a strong commitment to improvement of the park, but other funding opportunities will need to be pursued and proposals consulted upon. So we're not giving up on Ashton Park, but what we're saying is at the moment, because we've got this really impossible, difficult situation, that this is the best that we can go forward so that we can actually really ensure that we are improving things from the point of Preston in terms of what was then called the Levelling Up Fund. And it's interesting because as is reported in this report, as is documented in this report, if we were to go ahead with Ashton Park, we would have to make massive other cuts, which I don't think is tenable. And in fact, the officers, you know, have actually said this seems the most, as the leader said, the most pragmatic way forward. I'm disappointed if any of our members on this side actually decide to abstain, because what none of you have also addressed, which the Liberal Democrats haven't addressed, is actually what we would cut if we were going ahead with the original proposal. And I would like to know that, because as I say, I think we're in a really, really difficult position. But I do feel that it's important that we go ahead with what's being proposed for Waverley Park, that we go ahead with what's being proposed for Moore Park, that obviously we go ahead with Grange Park, which is a tiny amount, that we go ahead with the North-South link and include Orchards, which was in the original proposals and then got cut. But we've actually done the public consultation on that, so there's no hold up on that. And that we go ahead with the East-West link. And obviously we continue with the tram bridge, because let's face it, it's being demolished as we speak. And I think there's nobody in this chamber would be arguing against that. So I really do feel that we've got no choice but to actually support this report. And I would urge members to really think about it and try and say, let's support this, let's go forward united as a council, hope the government agrees with us, and then let's look together at what we can do about Ashton Park. Thank you.
Have you not spoken, councillor guys, on this? Okay, carry on.
Yeah, I just wanted to make two brief points. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If politicians want to take credit for things that go well here in this council, then they should not deflect blame for things that go badly onto officers. If you want to take the credit, you have also to take the blame. And the other thing I wanted to say was the motivation behind retaining the stripped down Ashton Park proposal is, amongst other things, because it guarantees retaining the 600,000 Section 106 money, which otherwise is at least at risk. And so it's about careful stewardship of public money and getting as much bang for the public buck as possible. It wasn't possible to be brought forward for technical reasons, but that is one of the principal motivations for it.
Thank you, councillor. Councillor Brown, are you replying?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What if we talk about smugness and arrogance, the Liberal Democrats really do take the biscuit, to be honest. I mean, you're consistent in being basically just into self-promotion, jumping on any bandwagon you can. It's disgraceful. For God's sake, please do believe in something. Councillor Jewell was there welcoming the proposal with his T-shirt on, and then, oh, we might win a few votes. We're going to oppose it just because the public mood is shifting. As I said, you know, we have faced a situation where we put in a bid with good faith, and we've had cost price inflation go up £5 million. You were threatening the rest of the schemes by putting in that alternative bid, and the officers told you so, but you wanted to do it. And why did you want to do it? To put it on a focus leaflet. The focus leaflets are the news of the world of local politics. You guys have absolutely no dignity whatsoever. You know, you take credit for everything, you go off for nothing. You don't come forward with a manifesto. And I really do hope that those communities will go back to Labour, because it was people on this side that are going on anti-cuts marches and demonstrations. It's you guys that are imposing austerity on the most deprived communities in our communities, including in Lear and Larches. So at least have a bit of, you should apologise for going to bed with the Conservative government on what you did to people in those communities. And this is an offshoot of this. These schemes, they are underfunded, they're inflexible, and we've dealt with it as best as we can. And it's right, I don't want to be an arrogant leader that doesn't listen to public opinion. It's obviously people within those communities didn't want the scheme in its current iteration. And your alternative proposals, you know, putting in an extra 7.8 million, would that have seen the floodlights that the residents don't want? You didn't even, well, you didn't put that in the document I saw. Would it have seen some of the things the residents didn't want? You know, so You just jump on any bandwagon and take credit for everything. So what we're doing is being in charge here. We want to be responsible. We want to do things in a way where we're actually delivering for the city. We want to listen as well. So we've listened to the residents around Ashton Park. We're making the best of a bad deal. As Councillor Wise says, the report says we'll try to get in extra funding to actually improve that area. We're committed to doing that and working with residents to do so. So, Mr. Mayor, we need to move on from this. We need to deliver the rest of the schemes, deliver the entirety of the schemes, and obviously make sure that we benefit the entirety of Preston with what we have left, and obviously use the developer contributions and potentially match funding to put into Ashton Park and look at how we can get other resources into that. So I'm happy to put forward the recommendations which are in the report, and obviously we move forward with the levelling up project, which can actually, and I'm proud officers have secured this money for us with our members, actually getting that money in difficult circumstances into our community to spend this £20 million and really improve the sporting facilities in Preston and the life chances and the environment of our communities who need it. So happy to move, Mr. Mayor, the recommendations which I believe are at paragraph 3.14 to 3.19. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. We'll now move to the vote for this report. All those in favour, please show. Count them. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? The report is carried. Moving on. Agenda item 12. This is a report on the procurement of water supplies, wastewater and ancillary services. Councillor Henshaw, will you be moving this report?
Yes, I am. It's a fairly straightforward report. We already get our water and ancillary stuff using this framework, the Crown Commercial
Excuse
Service.
me, one meeting, one speaker.
Yes, so we already use the Crown Commercial Services as a procurement for our energy, and we've been using it for our water. This is just about extending it. We've got 12 months then for the CCS to sort of have a look at our water usage, and that, along with other councils, it adds to like the buying power, and we can get it a little bit cheaper if we're part of this organisation. So yeah, I'm happy to move this. It's very straightforward, I think. Thanks.
Thank you, councillor. Who's seconding it, please? Sorry, councillor, what's your name? Pete, thank you. Any comments on this report, please? All right, we'll go to the vote. All those in favour, please show. Thank you. All those against? Any abstentions? Report is accepted. Item 14 is notification of changes to the membership of committees. Are there any changes to be reported? Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one from us. Councillor Tony Raisbeck will be replacing Councillor Neil Darby on overview and scrutiny. Thank you.
Did you get that? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Long day, hasn't it been? We just got the one. So Councillor Dwyer will not be on the taxi miscellaneous committee. Councillor Wise is going to replace him, and Councillor Dwyer is then going to become a substitute. I think obviously that's linked to his work commitments, which are quite extensive. Thank you. Councillor Dwyer will be removed from the taxi and miscellaneous committee, replaced by Councillor Wise. Councillor Dwyer will then become a substitute for that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Nobody else?
Mr. Mayor, not at the moment. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Item 14 is a notice of motion submitted by Councillor Darby entitled 2 child limit on benefit payments. Councillor Darby, can you move your motion, please?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as most of you know, the 2 child limit on benefits was a law implemented by the Conservatives in 2017, just to get ahead of the inevitable claims of the coalition. The law was implemented perhaps largely in favour of the Daily Mail rather than anything else. It certainly has not achieved what it set out to do. We don't move our country forward by holding people back, and least of all those who are furthest behind. For example, we don't look to stifle our best schools to help others catch up, but work with those who need it to make them better. And that's the philosophy that we believe in and the philosophy that we think should be implemented across the board. And that comes to the benefit system as well. A study led by the University of York has damned this policy as one of the single most poverty-producing policies in the social security system, and looks set to continue pushing up child poverty until they are finally abolished. The charity End Child Poverty research by the charity End Child Poverty shows that simply by ending this policy alone will lift 250,000 children across the country out of poverty overnight. Now, some parties might have had enough of experts, but we choose to believe in the wisdom of listening to those who have devoted their lives to the study of a topic and who use this knowledge to help us form intelligent policy, better than a 5-minute sweep of social media and a read of the Daily Mail. Scrapping this policy might be compassionate, and many of us here, across both sides of the chamber, represent some of the least well-off families, not just in Preston, but in the country. And we know all too well how hard life can be. But the argument can also be made in intelligent, hard-nosed economics. Reversing the 2-child limit might cost up to £1.3 billion, again, according to the charity End Child Poverty. However, we also know that child poverty costs the UK an estimated £36 billion every year. So the policy will pay for itself. Or perhaps we can recover some of the billions from Tory donors and PPE sales, but that's by the by. In Preston, we know that over 1/3 of children in our city are living in poverty. That's 12,425 children. And as Preston City Council, it's our duty to represent them and stand up for them in the best of our ability. And in this case, the best of our ability is to lobby in the strongest terms for the government to scrap the 2-child limit. And if we are successful in this, this will directly help improve the lives of nearly 5,000 children who are currently affected by this policy. Because primarily the greatest victims of this policy are the children who have done nothing wrong and who deserve an equal start in life. By the age of 7, or according to some studies, even by the age of 5, poverty has already severely impacted the opportunities a child will have for the rest of their life. So we should be doing what we can do to try and prevent this impact for as many as we can for our children here in Preston. And the way that we should be doing that is to ask the new government to scrap the 2-child limit on benefits. I would also like to ask Mr. Mayor, I know there has been an amendment put forward. I would ask that under Council Procedure Rules, item 14.6, paragraph 1.1 and 4, I'd ask you to strike the amendment as it substantially changes this motion rather than being an amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. Have you got a seconder for this motion? Thank you. Do you wish to speak now or reserve your right? Okay, back on.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to echo the thoughts of Neil there and thank him for his time putting this proposal forward. More on a personal level than anything else, I come from a family where I have 2 older siblings and 3 younger siblings, so I'm one of 6. Essentially, with this 2-child limit, I am not worth the money that my sisters were worth above me, and also the stress that that would have put on my parents should this have been in place at the time. I personally have 2 children. I've got a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. Financial constraints, among other things, I probably will not have any more. However, on the school run and speaking to parents within our area in Preston, I see the financial restraint that's put upon them every single day. Cost of living crisis and the cost of raising children is not cheap. There were some remarks before, and I didn't want to get too political about this one, about flip-flopping over on this side of the Parliament. I believe Labour wanted to scrap this, but then not. I just wonder how Labour feel about that. But that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, councillor. Now we have an amendment from, is it councillor Akhtar? Now, councillor Darby queried the amendment about the constitution. The monitoring officer says it's okay, the amendment, to carry on with it. Do you want me to get her to say the wording? Please.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, we've looked at it. In an amendment to a motion, you can obviously leave out words, insert words, so long as the effect is not to negate the motion. And I think really the outcome is exactly as per the motion that's been put before us, writing to government to obviously express the concerns of Preston, of the council. So as far as I'm concerned, it does not negate the motion.
Councillor Akhtar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And, you know, I welcome the motion that Councillor Darby has put to us at this council meeting. I don't think there's a big gulf in our thinking in relation to the impact that the 2-child policy has on children, particularly children in some of the poorest parts of our country. In my own ward in Plungington, you know, the national average is 9 children in every classroom living in poverty. In my ward, it's 12 children in every classroom living in poverty. So we absolutely understand on this side, through our residents, our own families and our neighbourhoods and our neighbours, what the reality of those economic policies has been. But I think it would be intellectually dishonest for us not to look or focus solely on the symptoms that we are presented with at this moment in time. I think we need to look at the causes. And yes, I am going to go back to 2010. And yes, I am going to look at the role of the Liberal Democrat and Conservative administration, which started the decline, or rather the increase in child poverty, because the child poverty between 2010 and 2024 has increased by 4.3 million. That is not an accident. It's by design. And it wasn't just the 2-child policy that came in 2017. It started immediately with the coalition government in 2010. One of the most successful policies of the last Labour government was the Sure Start scheme. It served children in communities right across the country. A good start to life. Councillor Darby, you rightly touched on, every child deserves a good start to life. They absolutely do. And that's what Sure Start guaranteed. But in the name of austerity, and at the altar of austerity, what did the Conservatives and the Lib Dems do? They sacrificed the Sure Start scheme. So that quality start to life, the fact that children were being fed, were being given pre and post school support and services, that went. But it wasn't just that though, was it? Along with austerity came the cuts in healthcare provision. We know very much the mental health crisis that we have, particularly among young people today. Came the cuts in education services, the cuts in youth services and leisure facilities and other provisions left, right and centre that hurt and harmed young children and young people. But it wasn't just children and young people that were being harmed and hurt by the policies of the Conservative and Liberal Democrat administration in 2010 to 2015. It started, as I say, with those attacks of those services and the cuts in public sector policies. It moved on then, of course, in 2012. We're going to touch on 2012, the bedroom tax. Again, a really pernicious attack on working families, on working class people right around the country. It came to the council tax support scheme, which again attacked the working class and the most poorest of people in our communities. Then came, of course, the two-child limit, in 2017. But the point of this is that, your motion, the problem with it is this. I don't actually disagree with the abolition of the two-child benefit. I think it's an absolutely pernicious piece of legislation that came in 2017 under a Tory government, facilitated by the cuts that you had, your government rather had at the time supported in terms of austerity. And but the Labour position is this, and it may be difficult for you to reconcile, perhaps, and I can understand that. Is rather than simply addressing or fixing one part of the bigger picture, the Labour administration, Labour government is trying to take a more holistic approach, recognise that it's not just social welfare benefits or the DWP sort of piece. It's also about what we provide in terms of education, what we provide in terms of healthcare, what we provide in terms of employment opportunities for parents, and good quality housing, and all of those things. So while the Conservatives and then Liberal Democrats were cutting away, chipping away at the fabric of our our society and our public services, locally, Preston Council, a Labour administration, was tackling the consequences of that. We put in support for the living wage. We put in support for more affordable housing. We've invested in the first council housing project with Onward Homes. We've invested in city centre regeneration of 120 million. We supported the food hubs that have had to arrive as a consequence of cuts in and the austerity programme. This government's agenda is absolutely about tackling child poverty. It is absolutely a top priority for the government, but we need to do that in a measured and in the round, in holistic way to ensure that those families don't fall back. Rather, they have a proper support and safety nets in place to lift them out of poverty and keep them out of poverty. Because it's not enough. As that old proverb in English, we say, give a person a fish and they'll eat for a day. Give them a fishing rod and they'll eat for however long. This is about rebuilding the social safety net in this country, rebuilding the capacity of families to be able to not just exist on a hand-to-mouth, day-to-day existence, which we know is harming many of our communities. So that's why I'm encouraging us to support this amendment. The government has put forward a child poverty unit. We want to know when that's going to report. We want to make sure that our MPs are on board and lobbying and advocating for families in Preston. But we want to be reminded that this council has done as much as it could in 14 very difficult years to ensure that the poorest in our communities were protected, were supported, and were being kept above the poverty line as much as we could. And now with the Labour administration, it's only been in government a couple of months, it will need a little bit of time to get the right policies in place so they can be sustainable and we can keep people out of poverty. That's where we need to go.
Councillor Acker, your time's up. Thank you very much. Have we got a seconder for the amendment, please? Councillor Hull. Some more speakers. Are we? Councillor Ward, please.
I just wanted to make, just want to make the point here that, this is an amendment about today and not about 2010. If I want to go back to then and talk about what did happen to students, young people in the past, we did raise tax threshold, we did introduce pupil premium, and when we were in coalition, we didn't introduce a limit to benefits and children either. Clearly today, we are talking about today. And I know that people across the room there are in agreement with us, because I know many of my friends who are Labour supporters, many people I know, many people on the left, we have been arguing against this since the day it was introduced. And many of you, no doubt, if I'd followed you on Twitter or Instagram, wherever you are, will have said when it was introduced that you were against it and you thought it was wrong. And many of you will look at the policy that's been put forward by us and you will say, in essence, I agree with it. I agree with you. Sure Start stopping it was a disaster. You know, I can accept there was mistakes made in the past. And I think what we're acknowledging here is there's been a mistake made. It's time to address it. We know Preston Council has no power over the government, but it's just the means, isn't it, of showing a bit of solidarity with those people who are struggling, trying to put something forward to the government, to put them under a bit of pressure to put this up their priority level. And it's one sentence in the amendment that I find particularly interesting that you kind of wiped out, which is the sentence that says, the council strongly believes that the two-child limit to benefit payments is cruel and a harmful policy that should be scrapped. You know, whether you want to change other aspects of it, I cannot believe members on the other side do not agree with us that this is a harmful and this is a cruel policy that should be scrapped. Whether it should be scrapped now or in a few months' time or whatever, maybe we might differ. But this is about now, not the past. I would hasten people to think about it and about the original policy put forward. I think the amendment weakens it and it doesn't make it as strong and it loses the message.
Thank you, Councillor Ward. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, obviously, this was brought in by the Conservatives. I'm not going to support the proposal, but let's just have a look at this for a minute. The overall benefits bill in this country is £285 billion. And we have a new government. I don't envy their job, but their job is that I understood they were going to look at this anyway. So I think it's a bit opportunistic for the Liberals to come in now and demand something for today. I know you haven't been in government for a while, and last time it was with us. So, but it doesn't happen overnight. Things have to be planned out, etc. And I understood that the Labour government were going to look at it. To actually pick one element out of the whole benefit system and say, we want that overturned, we want to get rid of the two-child cap, is, well, it's just a bit of opportunism, isn't it? It's not right. You've got to look at the whole thing. And actually, if you just, before you form an opinion that I read the Daily Mail and I'm a child hater, I've got 2 kids and 4 grandkids, and we do fostering as well. And child poverty isn't just about the money. There's a lot more things involved in it. You have to take a holistic look at it. And I'm agreeing with you on that one. So, and I agree that the Sure Start programme should never have been scrapped. That was my government that scrapped it. It was one of the best things for kids in this country that had been done. So there's lots of other issues around child poverty. I mean, some of the stories I get from the social workers and the kids that come to stay with me and my wife are horrendous, and it's not always about money. So anyway, so I won't support this notice motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Councillor Potter, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Firstly, I'm actually quite surprised, Pav, that it's you that's doing this. I'm quite surprised on a personal level that's you that's put this amendment forward, because I think it's a horrible amendment, actually. It's the stuff you're crossing out. But and Councillor Ward has mentioned specific lines. What could you possibly have against those specific lines? Because you talk about the power of focus leaflets. The fact is you will have to justify why you have removed some of these lines. You'll have to justify on a position you held before the general election that why you've now, your MPs decided not to vote on the SNP amendment to the King's Speech, and now why you as a council are also purposely removing a line that says scrapping something which your own ministers, when in opposition, called evil. And I mean, it's astonishing. And I get the whataboutery of this in terms of what about the coalition? What about other things that we can do to help with child poverty? Yes, there are lots of things we can do to help child poverty, but this is it's not mutually exclusive. It doesn't mean we can do one thing but we can't do another. You have an ability, the Labour government has an ability to do something about this, which charities say would instantly lift some of the poorest, most vulnerable children in society out of absolute poverty. And not only did your MPs walk away from that, with the exception of some that actually said, no, this is beyond the pale, but now you're doing it in this council. And like I said, it's not mutually exclusive. And I can't get the argument you're saying, well, Lib Dems did terrible things over the last 10 years, so it somehow absolves off of our terrible things. What kind of a nonsense argument is that? I'm genuinely shocked, because I know you, Pav, and I know you don't actually believe that. So why have you done it? And I can't get my head around it. You know, you've had a personal relationship with Neil. You know what Neil's intentions are on this. And so this is, it actually is, it's sad from the Labour benches here in Preston that this is what you've resorted to. And I do wonder if you are going to have to reflect on being in government. Because, and I warned you during the budget crisis, both in this chamber and at county, that opposition is easy. Governing is hard. And this was a test. And you failed it. Completely and utterly failed. And he's laughing. The finance minister, I've upgraded him, sorry. The finance cabinet member is laughing about child poverty and his government's lack of action. So it says, and one thing that's going to be interesting as you go forward in this government, because there's going to be loads of things you don't agree with from this Labour government, particularly those of you on the more left side, is that for every £1 billion this government spends, what's going to come back at you is going to say, you could have spent that billion helping children out of poverty and you didn't. And so that is something you are going to have to live with, because there's no excuses for this. There's no excuses for this amendment. You didn't have to do it. You could have, and you'll say, I know I'm always the bad guy in the room for you guys, and I quite enjoy it, so I don't mind. But the fact is, you guys are going to get a lot more of this now you're in government, and you are going to have to do a lot better than what you are doing today, because all that people are going to read in black and white in history is that you tried to, when we said we should scrap this, you have specifically removed that line. Specifically, you purposely did it. And you, no matter how you justify it in the next few minutes, you purposely have done that. And all of you who vote for this have signed up for that, and you're going to have to live with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been a long day, so I'll try not to speak for long. Thank you, Pat, for an excellent amendment, which obviously I'm speaking in favour of. I mean, John, you're an amazing actor. You make John Gielgud and Laurence Olivier look pale in comparison with the way you portray yourself, you know. Do you actually believe anything you say? Because it's so unconvincing from this side. It obviously is just to try and gain favour, obviously, with the electorate, as I said before. We can't get, again, Pav has rightly said about our motion, what it's trying to do. Some of the things that the Conservative and Liberal administration did introduce, Pav has mentioned, but there was others. There was like the local housing allowance. So if someone wanted to rent for the private sector, the amount we gave them for the rent was slashed. Changes to the definition of affordable homes. To be an affordable home, you had to be 60% of the average rent. Now it's 80%. And the statistics, 2010 to 2015, the numbers of children in relative poverty rose from 2.3 million to 2.7 million. And this is because of the policies in their entirety that was introduced. Now, obviously, what happened is it continued after the Liberal Democrats left, but the rate of continuation was pretty similar. So the policies of either the Conservatives or the Conservatives Lib Dems were not dissimilar in terms of putting kids into poverty. The last Labour government, I was critical of many things, but what they did do, which was very positive, is child poverty reduced from 1997 to 2010, 3.4 million to 2.3 million. And obviously, what John did say about that is that we'd have had to make cuts anyway. You know, Gordon Brown refused to use the word cuts for years. He actually introduced a toddler tax credit in the 2010 budget, the last Labour budget. The Liberal Democrats scrapped it. We had the Child Trust Fund. The Liberal Democrats scrapped that, which would have given kids probably £15,000 or £20,000 now when they got to 18. Got rid of by the Liberal Democrats. The Labour 50% tax rate, scrapped by the Liberal Democrats and the Conservative partners. all putting kids into poverty in our communities and increasing inequalities and ensuring the super rich got away with it. You know, not one person in our community was responsible for that financial crash of 2007-8. And you guys with the Tories made sure they suffered. You made sure that they suffered. And obviously, Labour would not, if we'd have continued in government, continued with the levels of austerity and cuts that you guys did. There might have been some, but no way as near, because we were committed to eradicate child poverty by 2020, and you put it up. And I think shame on the Lib Dems for doing that. You know, shame on the Lib Dems for doing that. You should know better. The party of the welfare state, the party of Beveridge, you should have known a lot better, but you chose to do it just for opportunism. And you talk about errors of judgment, getting in bed with the Tories for 5 years with the biggest error of judgment you could have done. Obviously, our emotion does want to write to the new Labour government, who will be taking it seriously, we hope. But we want to look at the policies of 2010 to 2024 in their entirety, because obviously the 2-child limit I personally would like to see removed, but there's other policies that have increased child poverty as well, and they need to be all be looked at by the new government, and obviously the most effective way to reduce child poverty in our communities. But also it's what we can do locally, because we have been a living wage employer, and we've been encouraging the living wage. Most of our public sector now pay the living wage. If you do business with the council, we say pay the living wage. 2008, I put a motion forward. Half the Liberal Democrat group voted against it, including Councillor Shannon and others. You know, that tackles child poverty for those in work. Maximising affordable homes. We're working with public sector partners to build affordable homes, building council houses. The work with Councillor Khan to do the many community food hubs and pantries. People go to that, they get £30, £40 a week off if they want. Preston Digital Cooperative providing free broadband. We're doing everything we can, but crucially, Martin has indicated he's going to look at a policy from the Conservative and Liberal Democrat years, which is a council tax support scheme, which does mean the poorest benefit claimants, many of them disabled, have to find at least £5 a week and pay it to this council. We look to see if there's flexibility to get rid of that. And this is something practically we can do. Obviously, writing to government is good, but what we can do now as an authority to tackle child poverty is the most important thing. So obviously, you know, I understand your sentiment and I think it's a positive one, but I do think you need to look at your own record. And if you do get back into government again, which is unlikely, maybe think about who your partners might be. But more importantly, we want to make sure what we can do now as a Labour council, because we're tough and resilient in this council. We've had, obviously, a Tory government since 2010 to 2024. That's very recently changed, but during those years, we fought back with our community wealth building policies and did everything we could to tackle inequalities with the powers and influence we've had. We're happy to support Councillor Akhtar's excellent amendment, and obviously let's hope we can move forward with our amendments. I think it's a more rational one going forward. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Councillor Hull, you seconded the amendment. Do you wish to speak before we go to the vote? Do you know what briefly is?
Yes.
Right.
There's no need to say very much, Mr. Mayor, because it is certainly true, as we all know, that the Lib-Tory alliance that came into office abolished Sure Start, amongst other things. Child poverty is a matter of money. And the amount of money that's spent in bringing children out of poverty as a percentage of the revenue and customs take in last year. Last year, Mr. Mayor, the revenue and customs brought in just under £865 billion. Now, when you talk about 200 billion of that being used for social care, the vast majority of that 200 billion goes on the National Health Service. And I will defend the National Health Service as long as I'm able to breathe. Child poverty is about money. Some kids have food, some kids don't. Some kids can afford £36,000 a year school fees, other kids don't. And so it is a matter of money. And the Liberal Democrats' expediency never ceases to amaze me. When you start talking about when you're in government, you have responsibility. Yes. When you're in opposition, you can promise free universal degrees. You can promise privatising cannabis or like legalising cannabis. Sorry, it's already privatised. Don't worry about that. But you can do all those sorts of things in opposition, John. Yes. You can, being in opposition is easy, I agree with you. You can say all sorts of things because you have no responsibility for them. But when you were in league with the Conservatives, you made children in this country poor. Sewer starters gone, and those things we will not forget. And I don't really need to add any more, Mr. Mayor. It's Pav's amendment, and he may wish to speak as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Councillor Hull. Councillor Darby, the right to reply, I believe, before we vote on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So as predicted, we've enjoyed the last 20 odd minutes hearing the greatest hits of Coalition. So thank you very much for that. That's was a great deal of fun. Although I suppose it is worth pointing out that having heard all of this list of sins that the Coalition committed, there's a notable silence coming from Labour here today and in government about what they're going to do to reverse some of these policies that you told us just a moment ago were so very evil. We talked about food banks and some of the things that this Labour administration has done here in Preston over the last few years to help people who have been suffering in poverty. And I do applaud some of that. And highlighting some of that in the amendment is all to the good. That's not a problem. I don't have an issue with that. But we have to ask, if we were to scrap the two-child benefit policy, and if we were to take those 5,000 children in Preston out of child poverty, maybe we would need less of that in the first place. You talk about child poverty, how it went up between 2010 to 2024, and it did, and that is disgusting. That is terrible. But again, we're talking about a policy change that we could make that would bring 250,000 children across the country out of poverty at a single stroke, and yet you're not supporting this. Say, Councillor Thompson talked about, again, the cost of it. The cost of it will cost less than what child poverty actually costs us. It's the biggest single change that we could make to lift children out of poverty. That is why it's important. That is why this is the one item that we're focusing on, is because it's the one single biggest change that we can make. The other changes that you're making to the resolution, one of them, you've deleted the final resolution, which was, where able and relevant, the council seeks to change grant evaluation and award procedures to seek to address the additional support required by larger families who are impacted by the existing two-child funding cap. That was something that we could have done here today to help those who are affected until we are able to get this scrapped. The other thing, of course, that you've changed is you've explicitly removed the request for this to be scrapped. So while I respect the judgment call that was made, you have completely changed the whole point of this. As a result, our group will not be voting in favour of the amendment. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Darby. Now we've all had a say, we'll go to the vote on the amendment. All those in favour of the amendment, please show. All those against, thank you. All those against the amendment, please show. Thank you. Any abstentions? The amendment is carried, so now we vote on the substantive motion, which is the amended motion. Are we all on the same motion? So we're now going to vote on the amended motion. All those in favour of the amended motion, please show. Thank you. Anyone against? One against there. Any abstentions? 3 abstentions. Thank you. So the amended motion goes through. Item 15 is the Audit Committee Annual Report for 2022-23. Are we paying attention over there? This report is for noting only. Councillor Rawlinson, do you wish to move this report?
Happy to move this excellent report of the good work that the Audit Committee have done.
Councillor Darby, do you wish to second it?
Yes.
Yeah,
Pardon?
Yes, I'll be seconding this motion. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. So that report was for noting only. Okay, so we move on. Item 16 is the overview and scrutiny annual report for 23-24, which is for noting only. Councillor Rawlinson, do you wish to move the report for noting only?
To move it, I do look at it nostalgically when we had a more balanced chairing, but
We have a seconder for noting this report. Does the Deputy Mayor, formerly the Chair of Overview and Scrutiny for 2023-24, wish to come in on this item?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I get to speak. I'm amazed. I'd just like to say, never underestimate the importance of scrutiny and its role as a critical friend. And I've really enjoyed my time on scrutiny, and I do miss it. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Can we now vote on this item? All those in favour of noting the report, show please. Anyone against? Thank you, that's carried. Move on. Item 17 is a leader's report. Councillor Brown, do you wish to speak on this report? No. It is for noting only. Item 18 is the special urgency decisions. However, there are none to report to this meeting. Item 19 is the date of the next meeting. The next ordinary meeting of the council will take place at 10 a.m. on Thursday, 17th of October in here. 10 a.m., not 2 p.m. Now, the next part of council are the below the line items. So I need to read out this statement. But before we do, I think, do we fancy a 10-minute break, everybody? Oh, you want to crack on? Okay, then I'll read this. Now we need to consider passing the following resolution. That the public be excluded from this meeting they've all got home, during consideration of the following items of business on the grounds that there is likely to be disclosure of exempt information, which is described in the paragraphs of Schedule 12A to the Local Government Act 1972, which is specified against the headings to the item. And that in all the circumstances of the case, the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing it. Are you all happy to agree the exemption and move to Part B?